Chapter 1947. An unlucky demon ancient warrior was sent flying by the shockwave of the shell explosion. He was thrown dozens of meters away and landed heavily on the ground. In mid-air, he had already become a matchstick that had been broken into several pieces. It was obvious that he would not survive. The other Zandalar troll's head was sliced in half by a flying tile. The regenerative ability that the trolls were so proud of did not come into play at all. The Zandalar troll was blasted a few meters away and turned into a corpse before it even hit the ground. The southwest part of Thunder God Island, which was lower in altitude, was designed to be a quagmire for the invaders. The Palace of Thunder God, the Throne of Thunder, was located in the northeast. The incompetent invaders, limited by the terrain, had no choice but to launch desperate and futile attacks from the quagmire to the tall city walls. It should have been like this. The unreasonable Alliance cannon array ignored this point and directly used a storm of steel and gunpowder to set off a one-sided massacre on the entire island. Hard granite bricks 2 meters wide, 1 meter high, and half a meter thick could not withstand this terrible cannon storm. Even the aftermath of the large-caliber cannon was enough to blow all the nearby warriors away. The temple, which had a very classical and rough style, was like the purple-black sky in the sky, groaning in the cannon fire. The thinner buildings were directly uprooted. The violent explosion caused the walls of the palace to easily loosen and collapse. The roof directly disintegrated into countless fragments, like a sand fortress violently smashed by a baseball bat, easily exploding and scattering. There was no creature that could survive a 460 mm caliber main cannon. Not the trolls, not the demons, not even the deformed monsters created by Thunder God. These red and black deformed monsters, that looked like meatballs wriggling on the ground, took a shot from the 203 mm cruiser's main cannon. The tentacles that extended from the meatballs seemed to swell up, and then they exploded like meatballs that had been pissed. Instantly, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The smaller tentacles were directly blown to smithereens, and the thick broken limbs were blown into the sky. After the 460 mm main cannon, it was the even more terrifying Gustav-class railway gun. Railway guns of more than 800 mm were moved out from the depths of Naxxramas through the railway tracks, revealing their huge muzzles in the direction of the target. It was just a single shot, but it was like a huge hammer smashing a brick. The soil around the entire lightning throne was blasted to pieces. It was like a huge shovel specially used by gods had dug up a huge piece of soil at the edge of the lightning god island, exposing the main structure of the divine hall below to the sky. After 2 rounds of cannon fire, the sand settled down, and the Alliance's scanners, radars, and optical telescopes were all deployed. The battle situation had changed from an omnidirectional attack to a precise attack. Some of the mutants that did not know what to do had just crawled out of the mud and were hit by the cannons of the Alliance battleships that had been waiting for a long time. For the cannoneers of the Alliance, who had long since made arrangements to divide the battlefield, they only needed to move their cannons a few centimeters to fire. A ball of fire struck the mutated monster head-on, and amidst a blood-curdling screech that caused the surrounding space to tremble, the lump of meat completely exploded, turning into blood and minced meat that filled the sky before finally falling down in a swirl. Small-scale bloody rain continued to fall everywhere. The most important thing was that the Thunder Throne, which had once been the pride of the Devil Ancients, had completely disappeared from the Lightning God Island. The terrible cannons covered and flattened the entire island, blowing up every building on the island and turning them into rubble and powder. This was not the end. A huge floating island was descending from the clouds. There were towering round towers of various sizes on the island. The towers were slender, and the decorations on the spherical towers were mainly white with a lot of gorgeous purple and bright red. This was the other mobile air fortress of the Alliance, and one of the core kingdoms of the Alliance, the Dalajan. The Dalajan's arrival was completely without warning. If Zhu Tulan were here, he would certainly be surprised why it was not Naxxramas, but a magic flying city that he had never seen before. In fact, it was Naxxramas that was 10 kilometers away. It was just the Dalajan that had come. This was not important. A phoenix as hot as the sun appeared. It let out a clear and melodious cry, and proudly took the lead from the airport platform on the side of the Dalajan. Beside him were thousands of pure-blooded firehawks that looked like large fireballs, as well as thousands of fire elemental creatures. One by one, the inverted triangular fire elemental creatures descended from the sky and directly broke through the passage of the Thunder Throne. The phoenix flapped its wings and hovered over the lightning god island. Its crimson eyes were like a pair of small erupting volcanoes, constantly emitting flames. Its sharp eyes were filled with a kind of pride as the master of all living things, looking disdainfully at the world. It and its master, the demigod Kale, that's Eversong, calmly looked at the island, but it gave others the illusion that these two pairs of calm eyes were looking down at their new territory from above. The lightning god island was not big, about 3 kilometers long and 1.5 kilometers wide. Not a bad island. It's suitable to be the new base of the Alliance. His mount, the Phoenix AO, was several times larger than it had been in Draenor. Now, its huge body was almost half the size of a town, and the flowing flames under its wings easily brought out clouds of fire, with a temperature of at least 3,000 degrees. This terrifying temperature alone was enough to melt gravel into glass. The turbulence set off by the phoenix when it flapped its wings was like the sweat of humans working casually. But after such a spark-like light fell on the lightning god island, the entire area was plunged into a sea of fire. The terrifying sea of flames burned and purified everything on the island. This place is too dirty. I'm going to purify it for my master. Kale, Thats did not say this publicly, but he did it. For a full half an hour, Kaizi ignored the provocative roars coming from the depths of the lightning throne, and continued to burn the place with flames. When everything was over, Kaizi raised his eyelids. What's the hurry? I'll deal with you now. The phoenix descended magnificently. The moment the phoenix landed, a huge portal surrounded by flames opened behind Kaizi. 2 fire elemental leaders, nearly 10 stories tall, walked out from inside. The fire elemental fighter, Smodron, and the fire demon hunter, Sharnox, appeared with 2 molten fire hounds. It was not only them. From the Dalajan, an equally burly figure descended, riding an unbelievably large progenitor dragon. Alder's guardian of thunder, Torim. Following Torim were the 2 guardians of Alkavan, Coralon and Amaran. Of course, because these big guys were too huge, it was easy to ignore them. In fact, the Alliance Marshal Gavin Rad also came down with a few second-rate powerhouses. Chapter 1948. Kaizi smiled. Is everyone here? Let's begin. The Alliance had many strong people, and there were many cards that they could play. There was no need for Duque to lead the team personally every time. For the purpose of making use of resources, Duque would let the Guardians work, as long as he found a suitable excuse. There was a special existence in the Thunder Throne of Thunder God Island, Guardian Laden. Since it involved a Guardian, it must be another depravity drama. Torim, who had been sold by Wisdom Loken once, hated betrayal and depravity the most. After some stupid dragon died, Torim did not need to defend Otter. Under Du's instigation, he began to participate more in fighting against evil. For example, this time, he came to be a thug again. It turned out that in history, the troublemaker Black Dragon Prince Lachio had gone to the Thunder Furnace on Thunder God Island, and learned that the ancient devils had the powerful technology left behind by the Titans. He used the equipment to forge a sharp halberd, and then collected the power of thunder from the Storm Dragon King's corpse. Lachio sent people to continue investigating the Thunder Throne, and collect the stone slabs left behind by the Titans. Finally, he understood the mission and origin of the ancient devils. In this life. Sorry, I gave Lachio a cold song long ago. In fact, the ancient devils were once a pile of decorative stone statues in the experimental field of Pandaria. Under the effects of the curse of flesh and the spring water of Splendid Valley, they woke up and became flesh and blood, gaining life. The ancient devils who called themselves the Thunder God were not that great. 13,000 years ago, the Thunder God was just the son of a warlord. His goal was not only to conquer the weak races like his ancestors, but also to build a true empire. In order to achieve this goal, he traveled to the mysterious Peak of Thunder to search for the forgotten truth about the ancient devils and their power. He found something that opened his eyes: the Titan guardian Layden, who guarded the powerful Titan artifact, the Narek Fiend engine. The Thunder God controlled both, and then used this new power to proclaim himself the King of Thunder. He ruled Pandaria with tyranny until his death. Now he was resurrected, and wanted to cause trouble again. Even though the powerful Zandala trolls and ancient devils had set up layers of defense in the Thunder Throne, the ferocious beasts hidden in the underground caves of the palace, and the monsters left behind by ancient devils' dark magic lurked in the palace sewers. But so what? The group of fire element demigods led by Kai Z were enough to give them a hard time, not to mention Tarim and the other guardians to hold the fort. Most importantly, Duque had been using this method to emphasize the justice of the alliance among the guardians. Look, our alliance has killed another evil one and saved a fallen guardian. Under the imperceptible influence of day after day, the guardians had long regarded the alliance as a complete partner of justice, unknowingly tying themselves to the alliance. Someone who went against the alliance. Of course it was an evil force that had to be destroyed. This gorgeous lineup had easily defeated the Thunder God without the help of the Shadow Tracking Sect. They had even defeated the Berserk Guardian Layden. With the approval of Tarim and the other guardians, the alliance not only obtained the spoils of war from the boss, but also the Thunder God's heart. This heart originally belonged to Guardian Layden, and the alliance was able to understand a key secret about the Titans. On this side, the Lightning God Island still had an unknown lightning god and a fallen guardian. On the side of the giant beast island, it was a complete annihilation. Without the annoying fog, there was no need to defend the dangerous caves that were getting deeper and deeper. Who knew why the Zandala trolls had trained so many giant beasts? To add food to the Alliance's soldiers? They had tested it out. The velociraptor meat on the giant beast island was not delicious. It was too tough. Unless it was the orcs with good teeth, no one would like that barbaric taste. In front of the Alliance's flying fleet, the army's cavalry, be it the Velociraptor Knights or any other knights, was a tragedy. The rarest thing was that there were no Pandaren living on the giant beast island. Without worrying about friendly fire, the Alliance's fleet madly poured out the old-fashioned cannonballs they had accumulated over the past 10 years. Cannonballs were like that. Once they expired, they would be dangerous, and detonation would cost money. If they could not get rid of them within their expiration date, it would be a waste. Just like the Celestial Empire, in order to prepare for emergencies, they followed the Russian standard and prepared 7.62mm bullets in units of hundreds of millions. The specific number was not something we commoners could know. We only knew that there were about 30 billion rounds. The Alliance's stockpile of cannonballs was also awesome. There were more than 200 million rounds. There was no way around it. Any main cannon had about 100 rounds of ammunition. A warship had a main cannon and a secondary cannon. The 460mm main cannon was matched with a 155mm cruiser-class secondary cannon. According to this ratio, no matter how stingy they were, they had to prepare more than 2,000 rounds of cannonballs of all sizes. The Alliance now had nearly 10,000 large and small warships in the air and on the sea. 200 million rounds of ammunition was definitely not a small number. This was only because Duque had considered that cannonballs would be consumed quickly and that they would be innovated quickly. Even so, the cannonballs that were about to expire were always a headache for the Alliance military. Now the problem was solved. While Naxxramaz's air force attacked Thunder God Island, the Alliance's fleet also attacked Giant Beast Island, as well as the Zandala fleet in the northeast corner of Pandaria, east of Kunlai Mountain. The fleet commanded by Zul was nothing but huge. The wooden ships were no different from target ships in front of the Alliance's warships. No, it should be said that when the Alliance's gunners trained, they used obsolete wooden warships as target ships. The only difference was that there would be no people on the target ships, while the Zandala fleet had a large number of troll sailors. There's no suspense in killing them. It's like fighting primitive people. In the magnified image of the magic mirror, Admiral Taylor sighed as he watched the troll being blown away. 30 years ago, we were also primitive people like this, Boulanger Bronzebeard said directly in the magic communication. Yes, thanks to our leader, we evolved from primitive times to modern times. Taylor, a man in his 40s and 50s, felt the changes in the human world the most. In just 30 years, they had crossed the age of steam from the feudal era and entered the quasi-modern era. That was exactly the time it took for Taylor to go from a teenager to a middle-aged uncle. He was filled with emotion. Just as the Alliance's army quickly finished bulldozing the three places, Duque suddenly heard a voice. Hello. Is this Mr. Duke Marcus? I have something to talk to you about. His fluent Chinese seemed to echo in her ears. Miraculously, Duque was in the secret room of Naxxramas. Duque's heart moved. He knew who was calling him. Chapter 1949. At Duque's level, there were not many that could threaten Duque. There were many capable people in the world of Azeroth, and there were many that were worth looking up to or being wary of. When it came to Pandaria, there were only two existences that could make Duque take them seriously. One was Yashaji, and the other was this one. Duque stood up, patted his clothes, and gestured, "Be serious." The black dragon girl in Vashj, who had been a bit lazy a moment ago, immediately became serious and tidied up Duque's clothes in an orderly manner. Duque easily crossed the teleportation gate, and in the next second, he appeared on Mount Kunlai's clear sun peak. It was not as cold as Northrend, but standing on this snow-covered peak of Pandaria, he could still feel a chill. The cold was meaningless to Duque, who had a demigod body. Moreover, as the elemental lord, Duque could control any of the four elements in the world of Azeroth at will. The ice elements here had only sensed Duque's presence, and they had already cheerfully lingered around Duque, forming a small ice tornado. But this ice tornado was very slow, and the dust and snowflakes carried by the wind could be easily seen with the naked eye. Duque did not care about the situation of the elements. From the start, all his attention was attracted by the old panda man, who was leaning on a walking stick, had a kind face, and had extremely long white eyebrows and beard. He clearly looked like an old panda man, but even though he was a little hunchbacked, the natural aura he exuded made it seem as if he was one with heaven and earth. Duke could not help but raise his eyebrows. Normally, every animal that was independent of the natural environment of a planet would have an aura that was completely different from plants. This person's aura was not like that of an animal at all. No, it was not even like that of a living creature. Yet it gave Duque a natural and harmonious feeling. Oh ha ha ha. Mr.'s ability to control the elements is indeed amazing. That's great. Please forgive this old man's impetuousness. If you're in the mood, why don't you sit down and have a cup of tea, then listen to this old man's story. The old Pandaren grinned. Then, as if he was performing a magic trick, he conjured two mats, a short tea table, and a tea set. Honored guest, please take a seat. Of course, he didn't want to sit cross-legged or spread his legs and directly sit down. If Duque did this, the other party would not blame him, but would treat him as a foreigner. As a transmigrator from the modern world, Duque knew the rules. He just didn't want to do it. In the end, Duque still did as the Romans do. Kneel down. It was a very heavenly style of sitting. Although this was Duque's first time doing this, he had watched so many period dramas, and he had the systems help to replay the scenes. Moreover, after obtaining the body of a demigod, he had amazing control over his own body. As a result, Duque was able to sit up properly. Oh, esteemed guest, you seem to have a deep understanding of the panda people's culture? The old panda man asked with a smile. A little. Duque said humbly. The old Pandaren didn't point it out, and began to make tea. It was a little different from the way Duque knew how to make tea. The old Pandaran's way of making tea was more old-fashioned. It was obviously the simplest way to wash a cup with boiling water, but under the huge black bear's paw, it was unusually light and graceful, like a white crane taking a bath. The tea powder that had been ground was scooped out of the teapot with a spoon. As soon as the teapot was opened, a faint fragrance could be smelled. After picking out a small amount of tea powder, he poured it into the teacup, mixed it with a small amount of boiling water, and mixed it into a sticky paste. Then he picked up the teapot and poured some tea into the teacup. The whole set of actions was done smoothly and harmoniously. As Duque sat there, it was as if he was watching a godly performance. Not long after, the tea bowl in front of Duque, with a diameter of 15 centimeters, was filled with a bowl of evenly colored, gently swirling tea. Please. Duke held the teacup with both hands and placed it in front of him. He used a small amount of wind elemental energy to gather the aroma of the tea into the breeze and send it into his nose. At first, the fragrance was strong, but after a long time, there was a lingering fragrance lingering in the nasal cavity. This feeling was very magical. First smell, then taste. It really was the best. Before Duque crossed over, he was a bore. Tasting tea was not a skill that a college animal should have. He couldn't tell what was good about it. This kind of tea that left a lingering fragrance in the mouth and teeth was definitely not a lie. The old man's tea is very good. Duque made such an evaluation after searching through his barren tea ceremony memory. Oh if I didn't specifically understand your origin, I would be more willing to call you Mr. Du according to the Pandaren custom, because I always feel that your surname should be Du, and your name should be Ku. The old Pandaren said with a smile. Of course, if you think this is offensive, can I continue to call you Mr. Marcus? Duque, who was mentally prepared, didn't have the slightest psychological fluctuation. He took a sip of tea indifferently, put down the teacup with both hands, took out a handkerchief, wiped the tea on the corners of his mouth, and then spoke. A name is just a code. Since Emperor Xiaohao is an old senior from 10,000 years ago, then whatever you call this junior is willing to accept it. That's right. The old Pandaren in front of him was actually the last Pandaren Emperor Xiaohao. Some people might ask, isn't Emperor Xiaohao dead? In the magical world of Azeroth, corpses could be resurrected after death, and ancient gods could come back to life after death. Emperor Xiaohao could split the entire continent and cover all of Pandaria with a fog 10,000 years ago. Did such a blockhead guy really not leave a will after death? Du Muk was the first to not believe it. Emperor Xiaohao smiled. If it weren't for your decent appearance, I would think of you as a Pandaren with the most complete and great inheritance. You flatter me. You're the panda. Your whole family are pandas. Bah. Why does it feel like I'm not scolding people? Duque, who was complaining in his heart, suddenly lost his temper. You and your alliance are too powerful. So powerful that even my clansmen and I are incomparably fearful of you. Regarding your invitation to us Pandaren to join the alliance, my people and I have to be cautious. After all, it's easy to join a powerful cross-racial alliance. Swallowed to the point that not even the bones are left. Duque smiled. It seems that you really understand Pandaren culture. This is what I'm most gratified about. Our Pandaren's customs and living habits are quite different from the existing races in the alliance. There are countless powerful races in Pandaria. My ancestors and I spent countless years, but failed to integrate them into an equal and peaceful organization. Differences in culture and ideology are the most likely to cause conflicts and even wars. Emperor Xiaohao sighed. Chapter 1950. Indeed. Duque nodded. Conflicts often originate from misunderstandings, and misunderstandings can easily turn into conflicts. After understanding Yashaji's murderous aura, I found that it's the most unwanted. That's why I've always been wary and suspicious of the Alliance. That's normal. But the Alliance has done a good job. I should say, it's done too well. I can't find a reason to refuse to join now. Emperor Xiaohao sighed. Then join us. Duke was rather straightforward, directly inviting them to join. Can I quit after joining the Alliance? Xiaohao asked. Do you know about the Burning Legion? Yes. That's right. The Legion will definitely come again. And it'll probably happen in the next 10 years. As long as they survive Sardra's revenge war, the Pandaren can quit the Alliance at will. Even if they quit, the alliance will still promise not to invade the Pandorans' territory. Okay. Then I have no objections. Xiaohao nodded. Duke heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He had won over the entire Pandaran race to join the alliance, instead of the small water faction in history. The Pandaran had a very high proportion of professionals, and they had a complete set of professions. They were a very good addition to the alliance. Being able to trick the Pandaran that dominated most of Pandaria into joining the alliance was the greatest help to the alliance. In order to settle this matter, Duque had indirectly guided the public opinion. He first let Brainless Roar seek death, and exposed the cruelty of the tribe led by Brainless Roar to the son of Pandaria. Then, he guided Chun Storm Liquor, who had the protagonist's halo, and cooperated with Zhu Tulan to quickly spread the news to the ears of every Pandaran in Pandaria. The Pandaran were a gentle race, but that didn't mean they didn't have a temper. With the powerful but polite alliance as a reference, the massacre and enslavement of the tribe easily made all the Pandaran angry and condemned the tribe. In fact, this laid a strong foundation for the Pandaran to join the alliance. In fact, this was also the strategy that the Chinese were best at. Just like the peasant uprisings in the history of ancient China, the initiator first had to make the masses stand with him, and make the masses hate their enemies. Duque had done this with the help of Brainless Roar. His propaganda method was too brilliant. The alliance did not directly participate in the manipulation of public opinion. They only let old Chun, a Pandaran who had wandered out to the outside world, and killed his way back to find his roots, spread the ferocity of the tribe. From the airship crashing into the lost island, almost causing Shun Zhen to kneel, to the trivial matter of the jadeite forest. Even if Xiaohao had a feeling that Duque was behind this, he had no evidence. Moreover, the alliance was indeed kind. Without the invitations of so many Pandaran leaders, they wouldn't even take half a step into Pandaria. The Pandaran had no choice but to accept this favor. If it wasn't for the Pandaran being completely blinded and unable to deal with Sha, the Horde, the Zandala trolls, the Demonkin ancients, and the Mantis people, the alliance would not have entered the battlefield. Since he had decided to bring the Pandaran into the pit, Xiaohao would not pursue this matter anymore. Yes, Duke, you're interested in hearing it. The nagging of a 10,000-year-old panda? Sure. I don't have to do anything to deal with those dregs anyway. Duque nodded calmly. That was 10,000 years ago, or even longer than that. At that time, the Well of Eternity was still the Well of Eternity, and Kalimdor was still the land of eternal starlight. However, the Pandaren dynasty on Pandaria had lasted for countless years and generations. The Panda Empire was established after overthrowing the Demonkins' enslavement. The burden on the Panda Emperor was quite heavy in order to stand alone among the many powerful and warlike races of Pandaria. The Pandaren had no doubt that the current crown prince, Xiaohao, was definitely a future leader worthy of great responsibility. The crown prince had once cultivated in the Heaven Zen Temple, and was a martial monk with great skills. He loved the people as if they were his own children, and allied with the outside world. His brilliant diplomatic skills ensured that the Pandaren lived in harmony with the Jinyu people, the monkey race, the Gumo, and the Yingu races. Other than the Mantis people and the Demonkin, he even became close friends with the monkey race's leader, the Monkey King. After the crown prince ascended the throne, history called him Emperor Xiaohao. According to the ancient tradition of the Panda Empire, the new emperor had to go to the jadeite forest to visit the elders of the Jinyu people. The elders of the Jinyu people had the mysterious ability to predict the future through flowing water. But the prophecy that Xiaohao heard was unexpectedly cruel and terrifying. The night elves would provoke the Burning Legion, and the latter's iron hooves would completely destroy everything in Kalimdor, including Pandaria. Emperor Xiaohao, who had just ascended the throne, understood from that moment on that there was no more comfortable throne for him. His life would be full of ups and downs, and all the glory and wealth that belonged to an emperor would have no chance with him. He had to set off immediately, and begin a journey of salvation that concerned the future of Pandaria. This journey was only bitter, and there was no joy. He could only succeed and not fail. Emperor Xiaohao, who petitioned for the people, had traveled many roads and asked many people. In the long and tiring journey, he finally thought of borrowing the wisdom of the mighty heavenly Lord. For this reason, he personally climbed the highest peak of the cold Azeroth to seek the advice of the Jade Serpent. The Jade Serpent did not disappoint him. Here, Xiaohao finally found a way that seemed to be able to save everything. He had to release the burden on his body, purify his body and mind, and harmonize himself with the land of Pandaria. The Jade Serpent's mysterious answer made Emperor Xiaohao fall into deep confusion. What was the burden to let go of? How could he purify his body and mind? How could he become one with nature? Unexplainable questions made him lose the mood to ask about politics. He thought hard all day, but still could not understand the mystery in the Jade Serpent's words. Maybe it was because he was not capable enough? Then, was an emperor who did not have the ability to save his people worthy of sitting on the throne? The sense of failure and powerlessness made him extremely depressed. The burden of all kinds of negative emotions was so heavy that he almost could not breathe. He felt that he could not hold on any longer. Seeing that his good friend was in great doubt and frowning, the Monkey King tried his best to help Emperor Xiaohao. He came to the Jadeite forest and tried to use bamboo to make a strange magic mask, wanting to use it to make Emperor Xiaohao happy. Unexpectedly, this method worked. Emperor Xiaohao's doubt was absorbed by the mask, and he was no longer doubtful. However, he also did not expect that after they buried the magic mask that absorbed Emperor Xiaohao's doubt deep underground, a monster that could create doubt appeared. They called it Sha. Hearing this, Duque sighed. Is this the origin of the Sha ? Yes. How did you deal with the Sha ? The only way is to control and seal it. Even with me and the Monkey King, who are highly skilled in martial arts, it took us more than half a day to finally subdue the Sha. This time the Sha is really sealed in the Jadeite forest. Chapter 1951. Recalling the past, Emperor Xiaohao was full of emotions. It was only then that I finally understood that Jade Dragon wanted me to eliminate negative emotions like doubt in my heart one by one in order to finally obtain the ability to save Pandaria. 7 burdens, 7 kinds of negative emotions. After Xiaohao sealed violence, anger, hatred, and so on, all his negative emotions were sealed, and the Pandaren of the Shadow Sect had no choice but to become the secret guardians behind Pandaria for generations, specializing in sealing and monitoring malevolence. After removing all 7 burdens, my body and mind are completely clean, and these tasks have been used for a long time in the passage of time. Azeroth is now at the end of the ancient war, and it's getting closer and closer to the prophecy. And I suddenly realized a problem. According to the method I used to save Pandaria, wouldn't the old enemy, the Mantis Men, also be saved? As if asking himself, Xiaohao stroked his beard. Duque nodded. Yes, indeed. I heard that Pandaren and Mantis Men fought on the battlefield all year round, and their hatred was deep. If it were me, it would be difficult to make such a decision easily. That's right. The Monkey King advised me from the side, reminding me of a fact. Once every 100 years, the Mantis Men will attack the Pandaren's coiled dragon ridge. This cycle has become an inseparable part of Pandaria. If the water is too clear, there will be no fish. Although the Pandaren and Mantis Men's relationship is difficult to ease, it is also inseparable. If we don't save them, we can't save the Pandaren themselves. When I figured this out, I also completely understood the true meaning of Jade Dragon's words. Everyone knew what happened next. Xiaohao sacrificed himself to save the entire Pandaria. Perhaps this statement was not entirely correct. He just merged with Pandaria. Old Master Xiaohao, you are indeed great. Duque's words were not flattery. Sacrificing oneself to help the entire race was a great feat. Duque always felt that if it was his turn, he might not be able to do it. Deep down, Duque was a layman. He liked to show off, was also afraid of death, and liked all kinds of girls. The biggest difference between him and the evil sex was that he didn't mind saving the world when he was having intimate moments with the ladies. Even though Duque now had the power to stir up the entire world, he still felt that he had not changed. The world has changed. Pandaria and Pandaren were not the only ones who could change the world. The future is still in the hands of youngsters like you. As he said that, Emperor Xiaohao, who had the appearance of an old panda man, suddenly had a glint in his eyes. Just this gaze alone made Duque think that pandas were actually ferocious beasts. Sure enough, in the next second, Xiaohao's words shook Duque to the core. There will be no fish when the water is too clear. I still want to emphasize this point. If it's fate, then I have nothing to say. But if it's deliberately nurturing hatred, then that's not advisable. That tribe led by Gurus, you were the one who let them into Pandaria, right? The old panda man's vision was indeed unique. As expected of a demigod powerhouse who had existed in this world for more than 10,000 years. Duque was speechless, but after thinking about it, it made sense. On Thunder God Island, the Alliance fleet had certainly shown its muscles. But that also proved that if the Alliance fleet had really gone all out, the tribe's wooden airships would not have had a chance to reach Pandaria. For a moment, Duque wanted to use an excuse to get over it. For example, the Alliance couldn't see the tribe's warships at night, or the tribe's illegal immigration. But when he met that pair of excessively sharp and distinct black and white eyes, Duque felt that it was meaningless. Gently holding the teacup, Duque took another sip of the hot tea, and then calmly put the teacup down. After the initial second of slight panic, Duque, who had calmed down, had vaguely become more pretentious. Because he had completely let go. At this moment, in Duque's fearless eyes, there was only one meaning. A monk doesn't lie. If I say I'll kill your family, I'll kill your family. Duque admitted frankly. If you want to destroy it, you must first make it crazy. Anyway, it was fate that the tribe came to Pandaria. I just gave them a push. Oh, the old panda demigod's gaze became sharper. Do you know that there were tens of thousands of parallel timelines that were almost identical to this world outside this timeline? I know a thing or two, Xiaohao replied. There are none now. Duque picked up the teacup again and took another sip. I destroyed a small part of it, but most of it was devoured by the world's main timeline. We are making our own choices, and the world is also making its own. Emperor Xiaohao's expression froze, and he was so stunned that he couldn't speak. There is only one timeline left leading to the future. I'm just making the choice I think is appropriate. What about the panda people? Emperor Xiaohao's eyes became a little dim. As if possessed, he began to mutter to himself. Then was everything I did wrong? Where is the future of the panda people? Duque put down the teacup. This time he didn't pick it up again. He stood up and looked down at Emperor Xiaohao, who was still kneeling. I admire the ideals of the panda people, and I respect your folklore. As long as I can do it, the Alliance will give the panda people as much freedom as possible. But this isn't a reason to stop the entire Azeroth from moving forward. When the freedom of an individual and a race is in conflict with the future of the world will make its own choice. At this point, Xiaohao's soul heart thumped violently. War. Tens of thousands of years of history tell us. The essence of war has never changed, and that is to fight for survival. I don't want to be a hypocritical politician. Shouting freedom is more important than life, before the war begins. Then, when the war can no longer be endured, raising their arms and shouting life is the most precious. I just want to tell you one thing, Emperor Xiaohao. Go ahead. Xiaohao replied. Times have changed. What peace, what struggle and interrogation of human nature. In the face of the survival of the race, they are nothing but illusory superstructures. What the Alliance and I need is a firm ally, who can win the apocalypse against the Burning Legion. Not a pig-like teammate who will drag us down. If the panda people can't do it, then... I'm sorry. Duque opened the portal. He had already made his stand clear. If the panda people still didn't know what was good for them, then Duque couldn't do anything about it. Perhaps he wouldn't attack the panda people's territory, but from this moment on, he would act according to the needs and wishes of the Alliance. Just as Duque was about to step into the portal, Emperor Xiaohao smiled bitterly. The panda people are willing to join the Alliance wholeheartedly. Chapter 1952. While Duque was chatting with Emperor Xiaohao over tea, the tribe did not stop their march. It was different from the original history. It turned out that the Alliance tribe first drifted to Pandaria during a naval war, and then Admiral Taylor of the Alliance. In addition, William's only son Anduin also came, which attracted the attention of the higher-ups of both sides. They gradually increased the exploration of Pandaria and invested more troops. After the frontline troops began to send back reports, big shots such as Wajin and Tyrant entered the battlefield. It was completely different in this life. Duque, who was well aware of the situation in Pandaria, planned everything before taking action. The great chief of the tribe, Gurus, was tempted by the evil voice in his heart. He directly abandoned his perplexity, ignored all the details, and led the army straight to the splendid valley. Along the way, he did not even separate from the main force, and directly killed his way to the destination, leaving only the minimum number of sentries to monitor the movements of the Alliance. In fact, even these so-called sentries were mixed with water droplets. In the name of monitoring the Alliance, Gurus left all the sick and injured soldiers behind. He did not even leave any supplies, and only gave them the right to burn, kill, and loot at will. Hence, there were even the elites of small clans in the tribe who took the initiative to leave the main force in order to encircle the most fertile land as their clan's future territory. This caused a large number of people to fall behind, but their morale did not drop. The orcs' thinking was that simple. When they went to a new place, there would be prey and enemies. Well, once the enemies were killed, the prey would all belong to the orcs. No matter what, they had to get rid of the eyesore first. At the moment of war with the Alliance, the orcs under Brainless Roar were even more unscrupulous. It was precisely because he knew this that Duque was not worried at all that Emperor Xiaohao would side with the tribe. After all, the tribe in this life was even more unscrupulous. Besides, Xiaohao, who had tied his soul to Pandaria, could clearly understand things that he could not have known when he was a mortal. For example, he could vaguely see the fate. Duque was not wrong. The tribe would indeed cause trouble in Pandaria, and it would be with Yashaji. The only difference from this predetermined fate was that the Alliance was cleaner and more noble. The brutality of the tribe pushed the Pandaren further towards the Alliance. If Emperor Xiaohao didn't even know how to choose, then he wouldn't deserve to be called the greatest emperor of all time. In fact, the moment Xiaohao agreed, Duque knew that the Alliance had achieved a complete victory in the mystery of Pandaria. All that was left was to follow the flow of fate. Just as he stepped through the portal, Duque turned around and smiled. Things like abscesses will only rot the body if left unattended. Sometimes, he had to be ruthless and let out the pus and blood before cutting off the rotten tissue. We can still hope for a full recovery. Emperor Xiaohao was stunned, and then he stroked his beard and smiled bitterly. Of course, he knew what Duque was referring to. On the other side, the horde was marching in. Without the hindrance of the Alliance, Xiaohao told the leaders of the Pandaren organizations in their dreams to evacuate the civilians in advance. The advance of the horde became unusually smooth. Under the guidance of Yashaji's mind, Garrush headed west from the north of the Emerald Gorge, almost without any obstacles. As long as he entered Kunlai Mountain and passed through the Gate of God, he would be able to reach the splendid gorge. Originally, Garrush wanted to go in a straight line and let his subordinates cross the lake and head west. Unfortunately, this was the territory of the ink-fin goldfish people. Although Vashj had told the goldfish people to hide and pretend that there was no danger here, no one knew who the F*CK told them, or who the F*CK mentioned that Dooku had drowned 1,000,000 orcs in a battle 30 years ago. For once, Brainless Roar was wise and actually changed his mind. The Horde army went all the way south and arrived near the Thunder Forest of the Emerald Forest. Through the bridge built by the Pandaren, they entered the misty boardwalk from the west, turned north, passed through the ancient road, and finally arrived at the Gate of God. On the ancient road, Brainless Roar suffered the first large-scale attack of the Alliance. The shameless Dooku ordered some flying warships to cover the transport ships into Pandaria, and laid more than 10,000 new magic mines at the exit of the ancient road. This type of landmine was different from the traditional triggering landmines. It had to absorb enough earth elements before it could be activated. After absorbing enough earth elements, the surface of the mine would be covered with a layer of soil. It looked no different from an ordinary stone. Therefore, there was no need to bury them at all. They just let the flying transport ships circle in the sky and open the big belly of the ships, as if they were laying eggs. Then, when a group of Horde warriors walked past the pile of delayed triggered mines, an inexplicable premonition of impending disaster suddenly spread in the heart of the Horde's vanguard commander, General Nazgûl. Retreat! Retreat! He immediately screamed, but he was still a step too late. A crimson flame erupted from the ground, like a small-scale volcanic eruption, and instantly exploded in the middle of the 3 rows of infantry. Almost in the blink of an eye, 2 squads of soldiers, Kukuran, who had gone through countless battles and gladiators, and was recognized as the best fighter, and the most loyal to Great Chief Garrosh, were turned into ashes. The rest were all crippled with broken arms and legs. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The large group of Horde warriors in the middle and at the back nervously gripped their weapons and looked around. Unfortunately, there was nothing. What happened? Garrosh walked out from the middle of the troops. General Nazgûl reported everything to his great chief. I'm familiar with this smell, no need to ask. It's the usual trick of the despicable people taught by that damn Duke Marcus. Don't worry, this is our enemy being afraid. Garrosh said rudely. Pass the order, speed up. But Nazgûl looked troubled. I don't care what method you use. I just want to see the results. With that, Garrosh returned to his guards. This world was magical. For example, they had professions. And the warrior profession had the magical skill, shield wall. The most exaggerated scene of human mind clearing in the history of the Horde appeared. Countless warriors of the Horde, regardless of their levels, were all lined up at the front line. They used their warrior skills to deflect the terrible damage, all for the sake of creating a safe path for their compatriots. Boom! Boom boom boom. No one knew how many professional warriors had their legs blown off, but they did not choose to become injured. Instead, they used themselves as mind-clearing tools and rolled to the unknown road ahead. Duque, along with many alliance leaders, watched this scene quietly in Naxxramas and did not speak for a long time. Jaina sighed. Heroic warriors unfortunately following a stupid and crazy leader. They have a better way to solve the problem. Jurban also sighed. Unfortunately, with their wisdom, they can only come up with this slightly tragic and stupid solution. Chapter 1953. Duque was speechless at Braindead Roar's IQ and EQ. In his opinion, he had at least 10,000 ways to solve this problem. For example, he could find a few unlucky people to test the triggering mode of the landmines. Was it pressure sensing, biological sensing, or elemental sensing? If he found a way, it would be better to let the goblins install rollers to open the way. Unfortunately, his brain was not good, and he was not knowledgeable enough. Duque snapped his fingers. Second stage. Soon, the advancing Horde army discovered that another nightmare had arrived. Countless small robots with 2 ridiculous mechanical legs and big red flashing lights on their heads charged at the Horde with ridiculous steps. If there was a veteran general like Varrock Salyafar in the Horde army, he would definitely not be unfamiliar with these things, because it was the nightmare that he had brought to the Horde in the 2nd year of the Dark Portal. Mobile alarm system. Nearly 30 years ago, the magical craftsmanship of the gnomes had created a special robot called Demon Spirit by the players of the Celestial Empire. What the Horde was facing now was the upgraded version of the Demon Spirit of the Journey to the West. What did that mean? The Demon Spirit that would send you to the Western Paradise. Although the Horde warriors were extremely vigilant, they could not avoid the Demon Spirits that were charging at them from all directions when the front was clearing the mines and the middle and rear parts of the army were completely blocked. As a self-destructing unit, this new type of robot used 2 layers of armor. There was a thick layer of baffle at the front, and the outermost layer in the other directions was a thin iron sheet that was easy to break. Between the 2 layers of armor, there was a large amount of small metal lumps and scraps left over from metallurgy and manufacturing. When a demon spirit rushed into the midst of the Horde soldiers, The Alliance thief in charge of controlling it from afar would press a designated button, while invisible. Through elemental control, the demon spirit would send all the Horde soldiers within a 10-meter radius to the Western Paradise. Bang! 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 Flesh and blood flew everywhere. Broken limbs spun in the air. The continuous explosions brought great panic to the Horde. Unfortunately, the Orcs' strength lay in close combat. When the Darkspear trolls left the Horde lost their best hunters and archers. It was not that the Orcs did not have hunters, but they were not as good as the trolls. Very quickly, not only the front of the group, but also the back of the ancient road, tens of thousands of Yao spirits that were flickering with dazzling red light caught up. They were like the messengers of death, and also like the whips of God that drove the Orcs away. They stimulated the nerves of the tribal warriors even more. I give the order. Everyone, split into echelons and charge forward. Brainless Roar finally couldn't help but issue a rather rash order. Batches after batches of tribal soldiers began to form a single line, charging forward every 20 meters. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The continuous explosions created a cruel and bloody path of death. On Naxxramas, Hoof was a little puzzled. Why don't we just send the flying fleet in? This is bloodletting. Queen Sylvie's eyes flashed. If we go all out, we can just shoot down all the airships in the sea around Duroder. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Muradin continued. But we also don't want too many powerful tribal warriors to obtain the power of Yashaji. After all, no one knew to what extent the so-called evil chi could strengthen ordinary soldiers. If every tribal warrior became a humanoid tank, then the Alliance would have a headache. So we reduced the number of tribal soldiers in advance? Hoof seemed to understand. Yes, not bad. Imriel, you've improved. Duque praised her. Sigh. I feel like you guys are a little like Eridar. Duque firmly denied this. He activated the holy light in his body on the spot. Immediately, Duque's body shone with a golden light, even brighter than the god of light. Tyrant was annoyed. Come on. Who doesn't know that you can use your shadow form to sneak into the Burning Legion? Duque was speechless. Speaking of which, that was a very long story. He still remembered that he pretended to be the bad guy and kissed Tyrant, and seemed to have forced her to do all kinds of shameful things. Then there was the 10,000 years of shelving play. Ahem, I've gone too far. Duque would not force an awkward conversation or anything like that. Bloodletting and whatnot. It was fine as long as it was appropriate. The Alliance used all kinds of strange methods to harass the tribe and make the tribe bleed continuously. After all, Duque did not know if the tribal warriors in this life, after being strengthened by the murderous aura, would be able to use their faces to take a bullet and not die. The tribe was prepared to attack the door of the heavenly gods with a domineering attitude, only to find that the door was already open. Yashaji's murderous aura directly ignored the will of the four gods from the inside, and burst open the door. The overjoyed Brainless Roar, under the guidance of Yashaji's remnant will, sent troops and goblin diggers to destroy a mountain and a lake in the splendid valley. In the depths of the excavated cave, they found the heart of the ancient god Yashaji, who was imprisoned by the Titan Guardians. Then the area was taken over by the Kukran army. At the same time, Little Anduin, under the escort of the Alliance's elite team, visited the temples of the four celestial lords in Pandaria, and learned from them about strength, tenacity, wisdom, and the meaning of hope. He also passed the trials of the celestial lords and received their blessings. In the end, Little Anduin used the blessings of the four celestial lords to create a legendary cloak for his father. On the other hand, the clueless Zhu Tulan finally caught up to Brainless Roar. He brought a large number of Pandaren guards to guard the original palace of the ancient fiendish mountain. However, Zhu Tulan was destined to be unable to stop Garush Hellroar's ambition, because the seventh evil had appeared. The seventh evil was called the Proud Evil, and it was the last sin that the Pandaren Emperor Xiaohao could not escape from. Under its influence, the emperor used a fog to cover the land. For 10,000 years, the Proud Evil had been waiting for an opportunity. When Garush awakened the heart of Yashaji, the power of pride in his heart allowed the dark energy to merge perfectly with his body. The tribe's war drums had already been beaten, and the deafening battle cries filled the beautiful valley. The huge box that carried the heart of the ancient god, the heart of Yashiji, was transported to the lake in front of the palace of the ancient fiendish mountain, under the escort of the Kyokuran guards. Garush, whose strength had been greatly increased, felt that he was in a better state than ever. That boundless power, that surging sense of excitement that seemed to be able to blow up a mountain with a single punch, stimulated his nerves all the time. The voice in his heart became louder and louder. There was only one last step left. Garush raised his brown-red head and ordered, "I can feel the hunger of this heart. Throw it into the lake." Chapter 1954. The lake in front of the ancient Fiend Mountain Palace was not ordinary water. The ancient inhabitants of Pandaria realized the importance of the energy pool. It had the power to give life, so they built an underground water system to protect the water source and nourish the living beings in the splendid valley. If Yashaji's heart was thrown in, although Yashaji would not be able to resurrect with such a small amount of vitality, it would still be a very important step on the road of resurrection. Stop those evil orcs. Among the Pandaren professionals, monks were the most common. Originally, in a large-scale battle, there was no place for the Pandaren to move around in a situation where the minions were facing each other. However, the uneven terrain of the splendid valley, coupled with the fact that the tribe did not pay much attention to the perfection of formations, resulted in a chaotic battle. More tribal warriors rushed over, but the green figures did not drown the black and white figures. In the chaotic battle, the stronger Pandaren still had the upper hand, even when facing the heavily armed orc warriors, who had begun to be infected by the murderous aura. When the Pandaren were still under the rule of the ancient fiends, it was the monks who brought some hope to Pandaria's bleak future. Due to being deprived of the right to use weapons by the rulers at that time, the Pandaren focused on practicing using chi to fight with bare hands. When the time was ripe for an uprising, the well-trained Pandaren had enough ability to shatter the shackles of enslavement. Monks were good at fighting with bare hands, and when fighting the enemy, they did not only rely on the power of their weapons. Although they were famous for their powerful punches and kicks, the fierce attacks of the monks were never restricted by their moves. Many monks were more inclined to use seemingly stumbling movements and drunken gazes to turn the enemy's attacks invisible, while their comrades attacked when the enemy was confused. Other monks were good at summoning the divine power of the mist to regulate the energy in their comrades' bodies, promoting blood circulation, removing blood stasis, and treating injuries. It was the Pandaren professionals led by the monks who fought on the front line. The Pandaran's front line barely withstood the ferocious attacks of the orcs, who had been infected by the murderous aura. However, when Gurus led the Kyokuran guards to the front line, the situation suddenly became extremely bad for the Pandaren. In the eyes of many Chinese players, including Duque, the Kyokuran guards were similar to the German SS back then. They were responsible for protecting the leader's life, and were also the elite field army on the tribe's side. They were a powerful force loyal to the great chieftain. No matter who ascended to the position of great chieftain, they were the warriors who defended the glory, the vanguard who eradicated the enemy. They were always the first to charge into the enemy lines, and the last to leave. They were the elites of the elites of the elites that no other troop in the horde could hope to match. In the original history, from the establishment of Agrima, whether it was destroying Illidan's forces in Moonshadow Valley, going to Northrend to end the threat of the Lich King, or eliminating Varimithas and his rebels under the Undercity, Kyokuran had made great contributions to the horde in every battle he participated in. As the Kyokuran guards who were absolutely loyal to the chief, they were the sharpest blades of the tribe. Almost in an instant, at least 300 Pandaren monks who were fighting on the front line were cut down to the ground. Correspondingly, nearly 200 members of the Kyokuran guards would rest eternally in Splendid Valley. But right after that, even more guards rushed over with deafening roars, taking the place of their comrades. The Pandaren, who had lived in peace for too long, and had never seen such a ferocious enemy, were thrown into disarray. They had more skilled and sharper combat skills. But they were forced into a panic by the opponent's method of exchanging injuries and lives for lives. The powerful inner strength of the monks could ignore the thick armor of the Kyokuran guards and directly hit their internal organs. Often, when the Pandaren killed the Kyokuran guards, they would also be dragged into the Yellow Springs by the opponent's dying blow. When Zhu Tulan's most elite group of monks suffered heavy losses, the Pandaren began to crumble. At this moment, a huge pontoon bridge made of goblins suddenly slammed down from the shore and directly connected to the ancient Devil Mountain's palace. Great Chieftain Gurus carried the famous Bloodhowl and strode onto the pontoon bridge. Suddenly, a gust of wind rolled up from the other end of the pontoon bridge. The wind quickly gathered into a ball, revealing the figure of the Shadow Sect's leader, Zhu Tulan. "Enough!" Zhu Tulan shouted. He stretched his left hand forward and made a sword gesture, while his right hand kept his unique two-handed hammer behind his back. Half of the Pandaran's face was covered by a bamboo hat, but there was a pair of black and white eyes full of anger. "You have gradually drifted further and further down the path of evil." Hell scream. "But it ends here." Ha 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 ha. Gurus let out a burst of wild laughter. He waved his left hand and bared his teeth. "Get lost. Pandaren. This is an unstoppable force." Zhu Tulan snorted coldly. "Your father had also dabbled in the so-called unstoppable force." What happened? No, what decision did he make in the end? When Zhu Tulan said this, Duque, who was watching the screen, suddenly felt that the sky was falling. It was all his fault for stirring up trouble. If this was the original history, of course, Lord Howl would have fought Manaroth to the death. It could be said that he had been enlightened after seeking benevolence. The problem was that in this life, Lord Howl had become a great hero of the tribe. He had participated in many battles against evil, and had even fought Si Thun before retreating. In the end, when he died, he still followed Duque. In the eyes of the Alliance, this was glory. Of course, in the eyes of brainless Howl, this was a disgrace. His father had given up the powerful power of the devil's blood. It was a good thing to wash his name clean, but the bad thing was that he kept his promise and went to serve a human demigod after his death. Well, in a sense, Zhu Tulan's mockery was very successful. Roar, roar, roar. Brainless Howl was completely enraged. With a momentum that could kill 18 generations of Zhu Tulan's ancestors, he charged on the pontoon bridge and swept toward Zhu Tulan like a gust of wind. The elephant trunk axe Bloodhowl emitted a terrifying blood aura as it drew a mournful arc in the air. Every time Gurus swung his arm, he was filled with anger, as if he wanted to split the abominable Pandaren in front of him in half. If it had been an ordinary expert who had stepped into the realm of heroes, he would probably have been defeated within 3 moves. Zhu Tulan nimbly dodged the violent axe. He was clearly only an inch away from the axe several times, but it was so close that it was worlds apart. Brainless Howl never hit Zhu Tulan. Zhu Tulan saw an opportunity. When the axe slammed into the wooden planks of the pontoon bridge, Brainless Howl was stuck for a moment when he was about to pull the axe out. At that moment, Zhu Tulan made his move. Chapter 1955. Zhu Talon took out his two-handed hammer, which looked like a mace and a fork at the same time. The shape of the hammer affected the appearance of the city. It looked like the pincers of a lobster. It was completely black, with one long and one short like a fork. There were cone-shaped spikes on all sides of the hammer's head. Whoever was hit by it would be left with a bloody hole. Unfortunately, Garush grabbed the stick at the bottom of the hammer with one hand. Seeing that they were about to fall into a battle of pure strength, Zhu Tulan was certainly not going to fight like a fool. He suddenly retracted his body and let go of the handle of the hammer with his right hand. In the palm of his free right hand, there was a Pandaren version of Rasengan. True Chi Explosion. Zhu Talon condensed a true energy vortex and wanted to slap Braindead Roar in the face and teach him how to turn an ugly face into a chrysanthemum. He had underestimated the toughness of Braindead Roar's body. The tribal chief did not dodge and punched Zhu Talon's true energy vortex. Bang! There was a sound similar to a violent explosion in the air. Confirming the law of action and reaction, Garush was unscathed. Instead, it was Zhu Talon who was almost sent flying. Zhu Talon's broad and thick panda paws scratched the wooden pontoon for a full 20 meters before he finally stopped moving backward. Although he looked good when he slid backward, the gap in strength made Zhu Talon frown deeply. "Ha!" Braindead Roar shouted, and suddenly launched the Hellscream clan's ancestral leap slash. Others might think that as long as they were not stupid, they would not take the attack head-on. Only the members of the Hellscream clan could truly understand the horror of this move. The roar was not to be underestimated. The essence of the warrior's fear-breaking roar was contained in this roar. If it was a slightly weaker opponent, they would have died on the spot after being shocked by this deafening roar of at least 300 decibels. This was not only a declaration of combat strength, but also a suppression of willpower. In a sense, this was an extremely powerful spiritual shock that was far above the Shadow Priest's mind blast. It was even comparable to Yogg-Saron's light spiritual erosion. It was under the suppression of his will that Garush leaped high into the air. His huge body drew an arc of death in the air, and the mournful red light on his blood roar was so bright that the lake beneath his feet was suffused with a crimson color. Die! Garush felt that he had succeeded, but he had overestimated his skills and underestimated Zhu Talon's willpower. After being controlled by Sha once, Zhu Taban struggled out of his mental confusion. His willpower had more than doubled. The dignified Shadow Trace sect leader, who was in charge of suppressing Sha, was actually controlled by Sha. What kind of humiliation was that? In the face of shame, some people were unable to recover from the setback and sank into depravity. Some people became braver and stronger as they suffered setbacks. It was clear that Zhu Talon belonged to the latter group. Zhu Talon seemed to be in a daze for a moment, but it was only when blood roar slashed at him that he revealed his prowess as a martial arts master of the Shadow Trace sect. The hammer that looked like a lobster's pincers stuck out at just the right time and easily diverted the impact of Garush's slash. It was as if Garush had thrown the bloodhowl out himself. What shocked Garush the most was that he felt a strange repulsion. Blood roar was rejecting him. To be more precise, it was rejecting the killing intent in his body. This was the real reason he had been disarmed by Zhu Talon and thrown away blood roar. "What? Are you saying that I'm not good enough for you?" Blood roar. Garush roared in his heart. He was furious. His pride and anger drove him on. On the other side, Zhu Talon was overjoyed that he had successfully disarmed his opponent. But as soon as he turned around, he saw a fist the size of a water tank rapidly enlarging in his field of vision. Ha! It was a right hook without any fancy tricks. The only thing special about it was that it was fast. Ruthless. At that moment, Zhu Talon felt as if he had been hit by the ram of a human warship. Puffed. Zhu Talon was sent flying by the punch and smashed through the guardrail of the pontoon behind him. Just as he was about to fall into the pool, his black eyes suddenly turned, and clarity returned to them. With a magnificent movement of the white crane's wings, coupled with his lightness skill, he tapped the surface of the pool with his sharp panda claws, causing ripples to appear on the calm surface. The next moment, he flew into the air and used the rising dragon fist to perform a physical reconstructive surgery on Garush's trapezoidal chin. Brainless roar was sent flying and crashed onto the pontoon in a sorry state. Zhu Talon stood on one of the guardrails of the pontoon and shouted, "I've dealt with both the minotaurs and the trolls. No wonder they left their tribes and left you. You really don't deserve to be their great chief." As he spoke, Zhu Talon leaped 30 meters into the air. Then, with the momentum of a falling comet, he gave the fallen Garush a heaven-crippling kick. If the kick landed, Brainless Roar's head would definitely explode like a rotten watermelon, splattering ketchup all over the ground. At that moment Duque, who was munching on melon seeds and naxramas, was speechless. "If you want to kill me, just do it. What's the point of talking so much?" Sure enough, just like in history, a hilarious scene unfolded. Once again, Zhu Talon had underestimated Garush's ability to resist attacks after being strengthened by the murderous aura. Garrosh dodged the kick with a crouch and a forward roll. Zhu Tilan used so much force that he broke the plank of the pontoon and got his foot stuck. Taking advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Garrosh leaped to the side of his bloodhowl. With one hand holding the bloodhowl, he tossed out the broken chain of the pontoon bridge with the other. From behind, he used the chain to strangle Zhu Tilan's neck like a cowboy would do with a rope loop. They don't deserve to join my orthodox tribe. With a sudden tug, Zhu Tilan, who had nowhere to run, was pulled over like a kite. Pfft! Garrosh missed again. He finally confirmed that Bloodhowl was indeed resisting him. He should have split the abominable Pandaren in half, but the direction of Bloodhowl's axe changed automatically. The blunt side of the axe hit Zhu Tilan's abdomen. Only a small part of the axe blade cut through his belly. The Pandaran's belly saved him. The wound was deep and bleeding, but it was a flesh wound, not a fatal one. Blarg! Zhu Tilan vomited blood on the spot. On the other side, Duque, who was watching the battle, could not bear to watch. Zhu Tilan was actually quite good at fighting, but he had terrible luck. Almost every time he appeared, he would vomit blood. As a result, people called him Grandmaster Vomiting Blood. Even so, he managed to escape the fate of being killed. Chapter 1956. Zhu Tilan spat out blood and cursed. Cough, cough, cough. Everyone will know what my tribe has done. They will find you and kill you. Garrosh displayed his arrogance with a ferocious expression. Come. I'm waiting for them. I'll be waiting for those arrogant enemies like Duke Marcus. In my fortress, they will face my own masterpiece of terror. They will witness my endless power and fall at my feet one by one. Anyone who dares to oppose my tribe will be impaled on the spire of Orgrimmar. You Pandaren are trying to bury your hatred and anger, but their power is unstoppable. Now I will unleash this power. Ha ha ha. Amidst his maniacal laughter, Garrosh hacked open the lock of the huge box beside him with his axe. When the lid of the box, which was big enough to contain an ogre, popped open, a purple heart the size of a carriage was revealed. A terrifying heart. Yashaji's heart. Even after 25,000 years, even after every blood vessel connected to the heart had been severed, the heart, which contained terrifying evil power, was still beating without stopping. Zhu Tilan raised his head subconsciously and saw that in the grass not far away, colorful insects were fleeing in all directions, subconsciously trying to get away from Yashaji's heart. A pitiful butterfly flew past, but it was only touched by the evil aura coming from the heart before it was annihilated in the black flames. Zhu Tilan lowered his head in pain. Then, he raised his head again and cursed fiercely. One day, you will be punished for this crime. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. It had been a long time since Garrosh was this happy. He laughed wildly, mocking his opponent who had lost the ability to fight. After laughing, he had vented his anger. His face became ferocious and cruel again. He opened his bloody mouth to the widest, revealing a mouthful of fangs. Who dares to punish me? Accompanied by his arrogant declaration, he threw Yashaji's heart into a round hole in the pool of life in front of the ancient fiend mountain palace. That was where the essence of the entire pool of life was gathered. Boom! A huge black pillar of evil light, so thick that it would take at least 30 people to wrap their arms around it, soared into the sky. The beam of light emitting a terrifying evil aura could be clearly seen from 100 kilometers away. In Garrosh's widened eyes, there was no longer any clarity in his pupils. Black smoke covered his eyes. At this moment, everyone who was still fighting in Splendid Valley felt that the laws of Splendid Valley were deviating. Life, nature, kindness, all good things seemed to be leaving him in fear. The evil power of the ancient god Yashaji, which only existed in legends, was descending. Its irresistible power not only tainted the entire Splendid Valley's water of life, it even used it as nourishment to corrode the entire valley. The greenery in Splendid Valley disappeared after being covered by Yashaji's black energy, turning into a lifeless black color. Streams of black water shot up into the sky. The terror of the ancient gods had used this method to announce that they had taken control of everything here. Ha ha ha. As proof of my power, you will be my first sacrifice. Garrosh raised his blood roar high in the air. Just as Garush was about to finish off the attack with his axe, a slender, agile, and deadly figure suddenly appeared behind him. Backstab. A pair of top-notch epic-grade daggers stabbed straight into his back. Brainless Roar, who had been strengthened by the evil aura, not only had his body been greatly strengthened, but so had his reactions. He twisted his body violently like a whirlwind, forcibly nullifying the judgment of Backstab. In the end, he was only stabbed by 2 normal attacks. Before the Brainless Roar could finish sensing death, another live figure had appeared behind Zhu Tulan. Bang! It was a smoke grenade. The other party did not attack. Instead, they used the smoke grenade as cover. When Brainless Roar used his hand to clear the smoke, he discovered that a man and a woman with similar equipment had already activated Sprint and were carrying Zhu Tulan away. Garush did not chase after them. His body was filled with arrogance. Perhaps at this moment, in his heart, a scumbag like Zhu Tulan was no longer worth chasing after. Just like that, he allowed Van Cleef and his daughter to rescue Zhu Tulan. What happened next was to follow the original development of history. When the Mantis Men staged the scene of 49 years of defecting to Old Jiang, the entire Alliance Throne Conference burst into laughter. In Dumok's eyes, this was no different from a man who wanted to be a eunuch, but castrated himself only to find out that the last emperor of the Celestial Empire was dead. Alright, it's time to end this farce. With Duque's order, the Alliance army finally entered Pandaria's airspace. Life on the Pandaria continent was extremely primitive. They worked at sunrise and rested at sunset. Apart from the Panda Men who were resisting the Mantis Men at the Great Wall, many Panda Men lived a rather peaceful life before the arrival of the Horde. After all, other than the Mantis Men and the Demonkin Ancients, the Panda Men had no mortal enemies on this continent. But on this day, every Panda Man looked at the sky with a slightly blank expression. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It seemed that an endless number of airships filled the entire sky. Those that were over 100 meters long and relatively slender were destroyers. Those that were close to 200 meters long and slightly larger were cruisers. The largest ones, at least 250 meters long, were battleships. These battleships all had huge propellers on both sides, but these propellers only maintained a minimum rotation. It was not them that provided the huge levitating force, but the magic net. In addition to the dense hedgehog-like anti-aircraft artillery clusters installed under the airships, there were also a large number of magic patterns. It was these magic circuits that flickered with mysterious light that were connected to the magic net and provided the power for them to float in the air. Thousands of ships, coupled with small aircraft, as well as a large number of griffins, hippogriffs, and other birds, looked like they could cover the sky. If it weren't for Emperor Xiaohao appearing in almost all the Panda Men's dreams and saying that the Panda Men had joined the alliance, this scene might have caused the greatest panic. In the traditional territory of the Panda Men, the alliance fleet was still very quiet. The ships merely sailed past at high speed and headed straight for the Horde army in the splendid valley. However, on the high-altitude outlying islands in the western part of Pandaria, that were far from the mainland and only connected by bridges, Mantis Plateau, the Alliance fleet began to bombard the ground with artillery. Chapter 1957. Bang! Amidst the shrill and violent explosion, a Mantis Man was directly blasted into the sky. His entire body was green, and he had strong limbs. As he was blasted away, his entire body disintegrated into countless pieces of different sizes under the terrifying power of the TNT gunpowder. Wow! Hearing the observer's report, the Alliance gunner who opened fire let out a strange cry of joy. No Alliance member cared about the Mantis Man's life or death. Many even thought that these monsters deserved to die. In a secret room in Naxxramas, Onyxia was lying on her exclusive bed of gold coins. No one could understand her, or Mini Dragon's passion and love for gold coins. By the way, why did the Alliance do so much this time? Couldn't they just destroy the Horde? The Black Dragon Princess asked directly. In fact, it wasn't just her who wanted to ask. Many people in Duque's harem wanted to know. For example, Kalia was quite dissatisfied with Duke's method of fishing and enforcing the law, but the well-behaved her chose to remain silent. Not objecting did not mean that she agreed. At this time, Jaina, Tyrant, and the other girls were also looking at Duke. Duke pursed his lips. That's right. I also think that letting Garush go to Pandaria, then letting him obtain the power of Yashaji's heart, and then using this as an excuse to destroy the Horde seems a bit redundant. Just the Horde declaring war on the Alliance is enough to destroy the Horde, isn't it? Yes. Jaina, Alicia, and Aurelia, who had a bad impression of the Horde, all felt the same way. Duque shrugged. The original purpose of the Alliance was to fight against the Horde invading Azeroth. That's right. But over the years, the Alliance has become a coalition of righteous organizations, centered on Azeroth, to fight against the Burning Legion, the Ancient Gods and other evil gods, as well as the evil elemental lords. Duque emphasized, since we call ourselves righteous, we have no reason to kill an entire intelligent race that has nothing to do with evil. Everyone finally understood that the Horde was an organization, and the Beastmen were a race. The two could not be confused. Kalia raised her slender hand. Then is it just to let Garush spread the power of Yashaji? Duque sighed. First of all, Garush is the great chief of the tribe, not the Alliance or anyone in the Alliance. Secondly, the one who single-handedly put Garush on the throne of the great chieftain was Thrall. And the ones who agreed with him, worshipped him, and approved of his every action were none other than the majority of the orcs who were traditional orcs. Duque pressed his hands on the armrests of his chair. If Garush is the culprit that led to the destruction of the Horde and the imminent extinction of the Beastmen, then every Beastman or his supporters is an accomplice. They're the ones who mechanically copied Draenor's barbaric laws of survival and applied them to Azeroth. When Duque said this, Jaina sneered. Isn't it? When they could defeat the humans, they would slaughter every single human in the village. When they couldn't win, they would be captured. They didn't have the awareness of a loser at all. They actually had the nerve to preach in the new tribe that Beastmen will never be slaves, and made themselves into victims. Do they really think we've all lost our memories? Queen Sylvanas was the most radical. She raised her hand, and a sharp blade made of pure air elements turned from nothingness into a solid object and fell into her hand. She nimbly played with this dagger-like thing, her eyes cold. The elves will never forget the crime of burning down the Eversong forest. Kalia asked Duque, if the Horde did not use the power of Yashaji, and only fought with the Alliance with their current strength, what would the Alliance do after winning? Duque sighed and shook his head. That's an untenable assumption. A long time ago, in the future I saw, they still chose this path. But if that's the case, probably, after defeating the Horde, I will exile all the former members of the Horde to Draenor. What else was there on Draenor? A continent that was collapsing day by day, with fewer and fewer resources. Now, except for the necessary sentry towers, the Alliance and the Horde had almost withdrawn all their manpower from the Draenor Void continent. Isn't this still asking them to wait for death? Kalia was a little sympathetic. Jaina was agitated. Azeroth doesn't belong to them at all. They are downright invaders. In the past, the Burning Legion gave us too much pressure. Duque only brought those traditional beastmen from Draenor to Azeroth for the sake of fighting evil together, and for the sake of humanitarianism. But, enough Kalia. Look at how these despicable green-skinned people are treating us. As soon as they gained a foothold, they couldn't wait to provide us with endless territory for them to hunt. We refused, and they directly declared war on us. How can we keep such ingrates? Kalia was speechless for a moment. This was a clash of ideals. As the native inhabitants of Azeroth, humans certainly had no obligation to welcome outsiders, to share the resources and land of this world. Duque waved his hand and stopped the argument. He continued in one breath. This assumption of yours is meaningless in itself, regardless of whether it was for the sake of racial reproduction, or to make the tribe stronger. The tribe members led by Garush threw themselves into the arms of the ancient gods, whose goal was to destroy the world. This is the reality. The tribe crossed the line. If it was a competition between different races for survival resources, then we could still negotiate. We could even give up our technology to increase the capacity of the land for the population. I have the creativity and the idea, and I can do it. I'm sure everyone has seen the hybrid rice that I had my subordinates develop. More yield per moo, more food, and less land to feed more people. But the barbaric and violent Garush, with his weak intelligence and reckless personality, directly chose the most terrifying path. He knew that it was the temptation of the ancient god Ashak, but he still chose to accept the power of destruction. Does everyone know what the ancient gods did back then? If not for the descent of the Pantheon Titan, the soul of Azeroth would have been completely corroded, the earth would have collapsed, and even the entire planet would have been drained dry and fallen into destruction. This is the reason why the Alliance will not tolerate the existence of the ancient gods and the Burning Legion. The women in the harem were silent. This was the final conclusion. Perhaps the Alliance did indeed suppress the survival space of the tribe. But the two organizations with different ideals and different composition were originally competitors. Since the tribe chose the most terrifying path of destruction, then it must be truly destroyed. Chapter 1958. On the other side, Sal became more and more uneasy. As a Messiah shaman who had saved the world during the Great Cataclysm, the Alliance recognized his merits and gave Sal full freedom in the Alliance territory despite the war with the Horde. Except for the Alliance's military base, the residences of various countries' politicians, and the core official places, Sal was allowed to come and go freely. However, Sal would be surrounded by a special team of paladins as guards to prevent the people who did not know the truth from overreacting to Sal because of the war. Since the last visit to Woking, hoping to form a Horde rebel army was rejected, Sal found the Tauren who was living on Sardo Island. The Tauren patriarch, Ben, received Sal, but ruthlessly rejected Sal's proposal. Even if Sal mentioned that it was likely that someone else had poisoned him, Ben roared at Sal in agitation. That's right, Garush may not be despicable, but he is indeed an out-and-out villain and an idiot. For the sake of you, Sal, I can even forgive him for killing my father. But I absolutely cannot tolerate that he actually supported the Tauren traitor, Magatha Grimtotem, who is likely to have killed my father, to occupy the Tauren territory. This is the greatest blasphemy to the spirit of our ancestors. Sal, the Horde is finished. The moment you gave in to those brainless traditional orcs, and gave the position of great chieftain to a brainless idiot, the Horde was finished. You don't have to persuade me. It is impossible for me and my people to join the Horde again. The Tauren can no longer trust a so-called ally, who once stabbed them in the back. Thrall, who was in pain, finally borrowed the Alliance's teleportation portal, an airship to come to the new Undercity. He found his last old friend, Dranos Salyafar, whom he had wanted to groom into a great chief, the current leader of the Forsaken. Once again, Sal was splashed with cold water. Sal, did you know? In order to create Focusing Rainbow and destroy the Alliance's fortress, Garush actually promised a Nastrian the position of the Forsaken leader. Sal's heart skipped a beat. Different races, different positions. Garush had undoubtedly crossed the line again by doing this. If the great chieftain could replace the leader of a horde at will, what else would he not dare to do? Garush stopped seeing me as an orc a long time ago. In his eyes, I was a beast-man loser who couldn't even be compared to a dead human. Losers have no right. Their only duty was to serve as cannon fodder for the tribe. Be it me or the entire Forgotten Ones, we are just his tools of war. But this, Sal was interrupted before he could finish. He's not the only one who thinks this way. The orcs of the traditional faction all think this way. Currently, the majority of the Forgotten Ones were once beastmen. When we were alive, we fought for the tribe until the last drop of blood, and we are still willing to fight for the tribe after death. But the tribe today is no longer our tribe. Thrall, do you understand? Sal's mouth was full of bitterness. He wanted to say, I understand. But he could not bring himself to say it. Once he said such hypocritical words as a living person, he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. In the end, there was only a sigh. All the former allies had abandoned the tribe. Was this really the fault of Garush alone? Sal felt helpless and desperate. He lacked information, especially first-hand information. After he was no longer the great chief, it was even more difficult for him to get information about the alliance. He had to hire neutral mercenaries in Gadgetsan. The alliance had kept this war strictly confidential. Most people and soldiers only knew that there was a war with the tribe, but they didn't know what the war was like. After the alliance announced that they had found traces of the ancient evil god Yashaji on the misty Pandaria, they stopped advancing on the territory of the Kalimdor tribe and maintained the line of battle. Large numbers of ships were seen setting off from the various military ports of the alliance and flying south of the Endless Sea. Sal could not figure out the military structure of the alliance. He only knew that at least half of the alliance's airships and sea fleets had not moved. It was impossible for such a large fleet to stay in the port without knowing. If they attacked, outsiders might not know where the fleet had gone in the vast sea. The fleet hiding in the port couldn't be deceived. The fleet was on standby. Tens of thousands of Air Force soldiers took advantage of the rotation and ran out to the taverns of the military port to brag. There were too many signs to infer the military strength of the alliance. Sal came to a sad conclusion. The alliance used less than half of their military strength to fight on two fronts. While dealing with the tribe, they could also take care of Yashaji. The pained Sal completely gave up on treatment. He went to the state guest house in Storm City and asked for the corresponding treatment. He was waiting for the moment when the alliance destroyed Garush's so-called Orthodox tribe. In Pandaria, the alliance's purge of the tribe continued. Brainless roar through Yashaji's heart in Splendid Valley, which directly caused Splendid Valley to be blown up. When the great chief needed someone to volunteer to receive the infusion of Yashaji's power, Markorak stood up without hesitation. If Garush was given enough time, he could definitely turn the entire tribal army into a terrifying humanoid monster with terrifying attack power like Markorak. Unfortunately, since the start of the ancient road, Duque had been consciously reducing the tribe's military strength to guard against this move. Almost as soon as Garush threw Yashaji's heart into the pool, the Alliance's air force arrived at the south and north of Splendid Valley. They were just waiting outside the mountain peaks for orders. Brainless Roar had just injected less than 100 people with Yashaji's power when the Alliance's cannons arrived. Boom! Boom! Don't be fooled by the fact that the Alliance only used heavy artillery to open up a path. For the current tribe, it was just one move, and they could eat all over the world. Other than Markorak, who had just successfully transformed, the tribe really didn't have any good way to deal with the Alliance's air force. Markorak's new move made Brainless Roar's eyes light up. Yashaji's aura Markorak connected with Yashaji's power and shot out a light cannon. It crossed a distance of 500 meters and hit a scout ship that was too close to the ground. The captain of the Alliance destroyer didn't expect the tribe to do this. He wanted to rely on his ship's speed and agility to seek death. Through close observation, he would be able to accurately guide the cannons from behind. In the end, the boss-level Markorak hit it and used Yashaji's shadow energy cannon to blow it up. Unfortunately, Markorak's bravery alone couldn't change the tribe's disadvantage. Chapter 1959. Not every warrior of the tribe could have the title boss behind their names. After all, not everyone had the talent or circumstances to do so. Most horde warriors would go from muscleheads to demonized muscleheads after drinking the shadow energy pumped out of Yashaji's heart. Purple crystal horns grew from all parts of his body. Although orcs didn't look like humans, their history was always strikingly similar. 30 years ago, Garush's father, Grom, drank the demon's blood and turned from reddish-brown to green-skinned, gaining power. It was like reincarnation. This time, it was his son's turn, but it was still the traditional orcs who caused trouble. None of the orcs present felt that there was anything wrong. In Naxxramas, a tall, burly green figure appeared beside Duque. His translucent body told the world that he was a heroic spirit. Grom Hellscream. He had become the first orc to demonize under Ghoul Dan's bewitchment. Duque could do many things, But there were some things that he didn't want to hide from his own people. Grom's mouth was trembling, and bean-sized tears slid down his bold cheeks. He knew that the Horde had declared war on the Alliance. When there was no war, he was more like a bystander, quietly watching the development of the Alliance and the Horde. As a super-old warrior who had experienced 3 battles at the Dark Portal, he had seen more and knew more than ordinary orcs. He never thought that he was a good father. He just followed the way his father had taught him, and taught Garush, if you didn't count the years when the Dark Portal was closed. Deep down in his heart, he was proud that his son had become the great chief, but he had never imagined that it would be his son who would bring the tribe to its current state of eternal damnation. Seeing his son walk the same path as him, but one that could easily destroy the Horde, he was angry and full of grievances. But this anger couldn't be vented, because he was no longer a member of the Horde. He couldn't even be considered an orc. After his chest heaved up and down dozens of times, Grom finally turned and left. I have no objections. Dooku sighed, but still put down his hand heavily. That was the signal for war. Open fire. Yes, all cannons fire. The orders from the Alliance Command Center were passed down layer by layer. The once beautiful and tranquil Splendid Valley was immediately devastated for the second time. Bang, bang, bang. The fierce cannons used shotguns similar to the Type 3 round. Relatively speaking, the destruction caused by such cannons wasn't too great, and could be easily dealt with in the future. At this time, the Pandaren army had already retreated, and the tribal soldiers who were still exposed on the ground were instantly annihilated. The Horde soldiers who had not been strengthened by the power of the ancient gods were so fragile in front of the modern cannons. The Alliance's current armor-piercing technology was enough to pierce through the scales and thick skin of an adult Twilight dragon. Tribesmen soldiers were nothing to them. They didn't give Gurus any chance to strengthen his army. The Alliance used half an hour of shotguns to clear out all the tribes on the surface. This part of the tribe did not represent the entire tribe. The Horde had gained some experience from the Alliance's bombardment. When the ear-piercing sound of the cannons rang out, the tribal warriors had already automatically found cover. The orcs hadn't learned to hide in the craters, but they at least learned to lie down when they were hit. Other than the top-grade armor of professionals, there was no metal armor that could help ordinary orc warriors withstand a direct hit from a cannon of more than 100 millimeters. Moreover, the west side of the Pool of Life in Splendid Valley was the excavation site for the Yasha's Heart. Before coming here, they had stayed in the underground excavation site, so they were familiar with it. Almost as soon as the cannons rang out, all the soldiers near the excavation site hid there. This time, Gurus saved at least 80% of his soldiers. Bastard! Damn it! Brainless Roar angrily destroyed everything he could see. After venting his anger, his divine logic came to a conclusion. There are still too few good soldiers. I need more strong people like Markarok. I want the light of death to fill the sky of Orgrimmar, and turn the Alliance's flying battleships into fireballs in the sky. So, he seized the opportunity to let every tribal soldier in Splendid Valley drink the black water that contained the power of the Yasha's Heart. On the other side, he waited for night to fall. According to the agreement, his flying fleet would come to their aid under the cover of the night. But the Alliance didn't have any airborne troops, so he couldn't find a place to vent his anger. Tonight was a good night for sneaking. The sky was dark, and the moon couldn't be seen at all. The Horde army fled in the dark. To avoid being discovered by the Alliance, they didn't even dare to light torches. The Alliance saw how they were burying their heads in the sand. When the Mage's Eye, which was based on the principle of elemental sensing, sent the image of the Horde army's sneaky behavior back to Naxxrama's command center, and the radar clearly showed the movement of the Horde's flying ships, the Alliance command center, which had always been serious, burst into loud laughter. Enough! You little bastards, if anyone dares to laugh again, I'll give him a fisherman's knife, and tell him to get down and charge at Gurus. Bulang Broadbeard quickly shocked the group of restless operators. In the secret room, Duque sat calmly on the fishing platform and looked at the magic mirror. He crossed his legs and swayed. While munching on melon seeds, he taught William, "See that? If I hadn't released these flying ships, brainless Roar wouldn't have had the chance to bring back Yashaji's heart. If I hadn't released these flying ships to take away Gurus's men, our soldiers would have had to follow behind the Pandaren and chase those mutated orc warriors all over the mountains and plains." William nodded. Even though he had been in the army for many years and had led an army to participate in many major battles, such as fighting the Lich King, William was still convinced by Duque's strategy of taking advantage of the situation, gathering all the factors for victory before the battle, and crushing the enemy directly after the battle started. This was no longer a simple art of command. This was the standard concept of a strategist. The Horde soldiers finally returned to the familiar flying ships, trembling with fear. Every soldier felt as if they had escaped death, and their hearts that were hanging in their chests could finally be at ease. Next, it was up to the airship team. They had a kind of almost blind trust in their own airships because they had succeeded once. Maybe they could succeed again, right? Chapter 1960. None of the beastmen knew that they were only able to escape from Orgrimmar the first time because the Alliance let them off. If the Alliance wanted to, they could turn every Horde soldier into a flaming trapeze and fall from 10,000 feet in the air without parachutes. Report, the sniper fleet is requesting instructions. How should we determine which warships are the targets? Someone asked. There will be elemental markers in an hour. Understood. Duke dismissed his men and turned to look at the other magic mirror. On the other side, the Eridar twins were smiling obsequiously at their master. Duque ignored them. Are you ready? Yes, we are fully prepared. We won't fail. The Gemini answered confidently. There was no such thing as failure. The core of the Horde's pharaoh was the Warlock. Warlocks want to enslave fiends, but every fiend that Warlocks enslave is dealt with by the high-rank Void Lord Eridar Gemini. Even if the Warlock was not a traitor, every demon around him was a traitor. This kind of insider was ruthless. Speaking of which, the Warlock becoming the leader of the Horde's pharaoh was actually a sad story. Because Duque created the magic net and monopolized the 4 major elemental realms, the Horde's mages were defeated on the spot. Without being able to connect to the magic net, the Horde was already at a disadvantage among mages of the same rank. Furthermore, Duque had brutally cut off almost all the elemental passages to Orgrimmar. This was very difficult. The shaman also suffered together with his fellow sufferers. Since ancient times, the shamans relied on communicating with elemental creatures to survive. Every totem was actually a god-summoning talisman to invite elemental creatures to help them. Duque's tyrannical monopolization resulted in only a small number of wandering elemental creatures remaining. Elemental creatures were proud, and most of them did not care about mortals. Of the 10,000 elemental creatures that the shamans interacted with, perhaps 9,000 belonged to Duque. Of the remaining 1,900 would not care about mortals. That pitiful 1% had to be divided by a group of shamans. If this situation did not change, the Horde shamans would go extinct sooner or later. If the elemental path couldn't be walked, then they could only rely on crooked ways to make a living, and warlocks were in high demand. Who would have thought that Duque would be able to eat from both sides of the law and the underworld, eating from the top and cheating from the bottom? Every warlock demon was a traitor. As a result, when the appointed time came, there were demons under the warlock's command drawing marks with shadow elements on every airship. In the elemental cannon team's mirror, the Alliance's scouting ship easily confirmed the target. The Alliance's fleet sneakily waited for the Horde's flying fleet to leave Pandaria and reach the Endless Sea before launching their attack. It was a night attack without any suspense. This time, it seemed to be all bark and no bite. The Alliance fleet was firing crazily from 5,000 meters away. Apart from a few cannon salutes, most of the cannons were silently aimed at the airships filled with ordinary tribal soldiers. Bang! Bang! Rumble! The violent explosion shook the entire fleet. When Brainless Roar angrily ordered the ironclads to charge at the Alliance's fleet like last time and destroy it. This time it was a true miss. Trash. All trash. Brainless Roar's arrogance dominated him, and he couldn't accept such a defeat. After dawn, what he couldn't accept was the loss of the fleet. Many captains reacted. The Alliance's cannons had accurately hit the hull of the ships in the dark, and most of them had directly hit the location of the ammunition depot. Most of the ships that were hit directly turned into fireballs in the air, and not a single survivor was left. It wasn't that there weren't amazing professions that relied on shield wall and other skills to survive, but below them was the vast sea, and in the sea was vast marine army. No matter what kind of super warrior you are, drag you to the bottom of the sea, and do whatever you want. Bastard. There must be a traitor in the Great Orthodox Horde. They despicably told the fleet's location, allowing the shameless Alliance to lay an accurate ambush circle. This time, Brainless Roar's brain unexpectedly worked, and he discovered the truth of the matter. One of them. But so what if the traitors were exposed? Those demons couldn't wait for the warlocks who enslaved them to die. Even if they died with the warlocks, without special soul-restraining methods, those demons could perfectly roll back to the twisting nether and resurrect. It was better than being a doormat here. Brainless Roar began to be paranoid. As they approached the Kalimdor continent, 100 kilometers southeast of Duroder, the Horde's aerial fleet was ambushed again. This time, the Alliance finally shot down most of the Horde's airships, and in the end, only less than 15,000 Horde warriors could safely return to Agrima. Jaina asked Duque how this degree came about. Well, I can't let Brainless Roar be too strong, but I can't let him be too weak. If he returns to Agrima alive, all the beastmen will think of him as a deserter. To maintain his rule, he can't get rid of his most loyal Kukuran guards. Oh, it would be too fake if he only had the guards left. So I was merciful and left him about 10 ships of ordinary soldiers, 10 ships of mantis men and 10 ships of ancient demons. In the end, Duque added, they were shot with shotguns. Jaina rolled her eyes. So he's a piece of trash with broken arms and legs. In the last years of his rule over Agrima, Brainless Roar carried out his reign of terror to the extreme. If any beastman dared to say anything bad about him, a thief would immediately inform them, and in less than 3 minutes, the Kukuran guards would arrive. The lightest punishment would be a beating, and the heaviest punishment would be death. In this life, under the stimulation of Duque and the guidance of Yashaji's power, Brainless Roar became even more violent. For victory, every horde must obtain the power of Yashaji. The Great Orthodox Horde, under the protection of the ancient god Yashaji, will become the ruler of this planet. In the King's Valley, Gurus, who had pulled out Yashaji's heart for public display, made such a declaration to all the Horde's people. No. Damn it. Ancestors above, I don't want to drink that black stuff. Haven't the beastmen suffered enough from the demonic blood back then? The beastman veteran who said this was immediately beheaded by the guards. Not only did the Kukuran guards arrest any opposition, but they also gathered all the Horde's members and formed a long line to drink Yashaji's black water. Gurus, who had already lost his mind, felt that this was too slow. He ordered people to put Yashaji's heart into a huge cage and soak it in the raging river opposite the west gate of Agrima. At this time, there were at least 1 million Horde refugees living along the raging river. Chapter 1961. Thrall couldn't sit still. He couldn't receive news from the Alliance. As the former chief, he hadn't abdicated for long, so he still had a lot of information channels. The Alliance didn't prohibit these channels. When an orc warlock who followed him to Stormwind City told Thrall about it, Thrall was completely shocked. Pa! The human book he was reading fell to the ground. Thrall stood up absent-mindedly and read the note the warlock handed him over and over again in disbelief. Isn't this history going backwards? Why are there still orcs who believe that kind of nonsense after more than 30 years? 35 years ago, Nazul bewitched the orcs, saying that the Drenii wanted to destroy the orcs. Then, 3 years before the Dark Portal, Gul'dan jumped out, and bewitched the orcs to drink the demon's blood, which led to the Great War with the Draenei. The war ended with the orcs' victory, which also stimulated the orcs' ambition. Thus, there were the First and Second Dark Portal Wars. Failure was always easy to forget. It wasn't known whether the new generation of orcs didn't have the painful memories of the old generation of orcs. Thrall didn't think that the traditional orcs from Nagrand were any better than the orcs he had painstakingly rescued from the human prison camp. In the blink of an eye, his grateful face changed to one of dissatisfaction with everything in the world. They longed for more land, more prey, and a more casual life. They would attack whoever stopped them. They would attack the heavens, the earth, and the air. They thought they were the best in the world. Failed. What was so scary about failure? At most, they would just die. They were dead. But the trouble they caused would have to be paid for by other orcs who still lived in the world. At this moment, Thrall truly hated the traditional Nagrand beastmen for the first time. Brainless idiots. A bunch of idiots. Do you really think that the orcs will always be the first race in the world? Do you think this is our world ruled by the orcs? Do you really think that the Alliance doesn't dare to kill? Do you really think that the group of powerful guardians will pretend that they didn't see anything? This is like sticking your head into the guillotine. Thrall angrily smashed everything around him. He didn't know when, but there were already tears in the corners of his eyes. Ow, ah! It was not the cry of an injured beast, but the sorrowful cry of someone who had lost a loved one. Sal's attendants next to him were dumbfounded. After following Sal for so many years, this was the first time they saw such despair in Sal's eyes. In his memory, Sal was always shining with wisdom, working hard to coordinate the relations between the various tribes, so that all the people of the tribe could live as well as possible. He worked hard and listened to the needs of the people of all races. He fought bravely at the front in battle, and he did not hesitate to go deep into the slums where the poorest people lived when he carried out civil affairs. It could be said that he was the model of a great chief. Many people were touched by his deeds. During the years when they were enslaved by humans, he was the only salvation for the beastmen. It was the bright light that looked up to heaven and hell. Now even he had given up? Great chieftain! Sal waved his hand violently. No. I admit defeat, but I haven't given up yet. The bloodline of the beastmen should not end in my generation. Did he admit defeat? He didn't give up. His words were incomprehensible to the attendants. Only Sal himself knew who he was admitting defeat to. By not giving up, he was referring to something else. While Sal made his decision, the Alliance began its final propaganda. Sally Whitemane appeared again to broadcast. Urgent news. Just now, the Alliance High Command confirmed that the great chieftain of the Horde, Gurus Hellscream, has obtained the heart of the ancient god Yashaji in Pandaria. He is now in the main city of the Horde, Agrima, performing evil physical transformation on all the members of the Horde. Switch to the vision of the Alliance spies. As soon as he finished speaking, the image of Orgrimmar's towering city walls appeared in each of the magic mirrors. The main hall was made of wood, and the magnificent walls of Agrima were built with rough bricks. From a distance, countless green-skinned beastmen were lining up, a small number of Taurens, and some humanoid arthropods that the Alliance people did not recognize. Through the labels, everyone knew that they were the new members of the Orthodox Horde, the Mantises. Everyone, after drinking a bowl of disgusting black, sesame-like liquid that ordinary people would never drink, changed on the spot. Their bodies swelled up like they were inflated, and sharp teeth or bone horns began to emerge from every corner of their bodies, looking extremely hideous and terrifying. Sally continued to speak in an increasingly passionate tone. The Horde, as we all know, the Horde is dominated by beastmen. 33 years ago, they were bewitched by great shaman Nazul, controlled by the demon commander Kil'jaeden, and launched a war against the Draenei. They drank the blood of the demons, and became extremely destructive green-skinned beastmen. They destroyed the capital of the peace-loving Draenei, Shatrath City. If we say that they were bewitched and deceived last time, what about this time? The Horde wantonly entered the territory controlled by the Alliance members for tens of thousands of years to plunder resources, directly declaring war on the Alliance, and used the brutal magic bomb, focusing Rainbow, to destroy the Alliance port city of Theramore. After falling into a disadvantage on the battlefield, they turned to seek the power of the ancient gods. The evil of the ancient gods is obvious to all. Thun's army had destroyed half of Kalimdor. Yogg-Saron's faceless army had killed countless Alliance soldiers. N'Zoth controlled the wings of death, which not long ago caused a catastrophe in the entire world of Azeroth. Our land was overturned, our cities were destroyed, and our people died in the natural disasters created by the ancient gods. Is the sin of the ancient gods not enough? Speaking to this point, Sally could no longer control herself, and fiercely punched the wooden table of the broadcasting station. Now the Horde, in order to rule the world of Azeroth, in order to erase the humans, dwarves, elves, and all the other Alliance races from this world, actually did not hesitate to seek the protection of the ancient god, Yashaji. How shameless and vicious is this? The scene changed again, showing a devastated village with bones all over the ground. At the end of the scene, it stopped on the skeletons of a mother and son. It was obviously a human mother who, in the last moments of her life, tightly hugged her child. However, what was left of her and her child's body was a stone axe of the beastmen. Sally's voice sounded again. The First and Second War of the Dark Portal. From Stormwind, to Iron Furnace Castle, to Stromgard Eagle Nest Mountain, Alterac Quel'Dorii Lordaeron. According to incomplete statistics, more than 3 million civilians were slaughtered by the beastmen, and 10 million humans lost their homes. Chapter 1962. The broadcast continued. After the war, the Alliance showed the greatest mercy and did not slaughter all the captives. On the contrary, in the face of a new round of attacks from the Dark Forces Scourge army, the then Commander-in-Chief of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, made the decision to allow the remaining orcs to cross the Kalimdor continent. Even when the Draenor world collapsed, the Alliance sent a large number of ships and provided food to receive more than 2 million orcs from the destroyed Draenor world to Azeroth. Back then, the orcs repeatedly announced that after they got rid of the berserk caused by the Devil's Blood, they would turn over a new leaf. They would focus on fighting against evil and fight for the future of Azeroth. However, how did the tribe led by the orcs repay the Alliance's kindness and trust? The scene changed again, showing the beautiful picturesque Pandaria. Before and after, the splendid valley, which was once lush with greenery and filled with the aura of nature, instantly exploded and turned into a pitch-black land of death after Gurus threw Yashaji's heart into it. In the scene, Pandaren corpses were everywhere. At the end of the scene, there was a little Pandaren crying. That cute appearance that transcended the aesthetic standards of the race, those clear black and white eyes, and that pitiful and tragic expression instantly struck the hearts of every audience. All the audience who witnessed this scene had the same thought. The Horde is too hateful. Too hateful. After discovering that the fog that shrouded the Pandaria continent was lifted, the Horde unscrupulously launched an invasion. Without any communication, they directly declared war and slaughtered the local intelligent races, the Pandaren who had lived on that land for more than 10,000 years. They wantonly planted the war flag representing occupation on the Pandaren's land. Then they attempted to destroy all the kind intelligent races in Azeroth. At the end of the scene, there were those mutated orcs who revealed ecstatic expressions after obtaining Yashaji's power. The carefully edited scene successfully aroused the hatred of the Alliance people towards the Horde. The last trace of pity in their hearts had already disappeared. If the last time the Horde declared war, the bombing of Theramore had successfully aroused the anger of the Alliance people, this time, it was the Horde's actions that completely made the Alliance people abandon their kindness and sympathy. Sally's final announcement became logical. In view of the fact that the Orc tribe has repeatedly trampled on the goodwill, trust, and conscience of the people of the Alliance, the leaders of the Alliance's Throne Conference are currently in a close discussion and have proposed a motion to exterminate the Orcs. In the Throne Conference, the various leaders looked at the scenes on the scene. They looked at the enraged people shouting to kill all the orcs, and they all fell silent. Everyone knew that Duque liked to fish. Everyone knew that Duque didn't force them to do this. This was just a natural release caused by a conflict of interest. The first time he drank demon blood and joined the Burning Legion, it could be said that he had been deceived. The second time, he did the same thing and sought refuge with the ancient gods. How could he explain this? Forced by the Alliance? Why didn't the Alliance just die and give the whole world to the beastmen as their hunting grounds? Stirring up trouble again and again, were they treating everyone as fools? Even if they were silent, there was a raging flame of anger burning in the hearts of the leaders. Any race that had been invaded by the Horde would not have a good impression of the Horde. Unfortunately, every major race in the Alliance had been invaded and slaughtered by the Horde. Humans, dwarves, pygmies, high elves, night elves, Drenii, Pandaren. It's time for the orcs to repay this blood debt for the core Horde. William said calmly and initiated a vote in the throne conference. Without any suspense, it passed unanimously. All mutated members of the Horde, regardless of their status, age, or race, are to be killed. All. The Alliance Throne Conference had never given such a strict military order. But every soldier of the Alliance felt that such an order was reasonable. After Duque started a war of public opinion and obtained the influence he wanted, everything became reasonable. Back in the secret room, Kalia caught up with Duque. Duque turned around. You want to ask, are we cruel? Yes, Kalia replied and nodded. Duque turned his head and cast his gaze on the magic net, on the red land thousands of miles away that was monitored by the mage's eyes. It was a desolate and slightly heroic scenery. As a leader, no decision can be made easily. The world of Azeroth is huge, but there are not many resources. It cannot accommodate two huge interracial organizations, and it cannot tolerate a race that is capricious and often betrays the enemy. Sigh. Kalia sighed. She was too kind. Even though the orcs had once brought the flames of war to Rotterdam, enslaving the orcs as gladiators was a stain that Rotterdam could never erase. Perhaps it was this compensation mentality that caused her to become soft-hearted. However, there was a limit to being soft-hearted. Garrosh had far exceeded this limit. The Alliance was mobilizing troops in preparation to completely destroy the Horde and kill the orcs. They were also waiting for the power of the heart of Azeroth to continue to ferment. Garrosh soon discovered a problem. The power of the heart of Azeroth was not endless. After turning millions of orcs into mutated orcs, the power of the black water pumped out by the heart was significantly weakened. Even though it was thrown into the River of Wrath, a large amount of water diluted the power of the heart of Azeroth. He understood. Just like throwing the heart into the fountain of life in the Splendid Valley, the heart of Azeroth could be reactivated. Even the heart of an ancient god needed a source of energy like a battery. Hence, he whimsically asked his subordinates to come up with an action plan called How to Throw the Heart of Azeroth into the Sunwell. However, at this time, a rebellion suddenly broke out in the Horde. In history, this was supposed to be a great uprising. Sal, together with Wajine's trolls, Bane's Tauren, Sylvanas' Forsaken, and Lor Themar's Blood Elves, launched a complete uprising. Because the power of these Horde's main warring races was too great, after overthrowing Garrosh's rule, William, who had formed a temporary alliance with the Horde's rebel army, could not do anything to the new Horde. After saying a few harsh words, he left with the Alliance's soldiers. This caused the Horde's power to fall for the first time, allowing Wajine to come to power as the new chief. In this life, the situation was very different. The Forsaken, Trolls, and Tauren were completely separated from the Horde, and there were no Blood Elves joining the Horde. No other races were interested in participating in the uprising. This time, the uprising was directly classified as a rebellion. Thrall managed to convince his old friend, Varrock Salyafar and his Blackrock clan. Chapter 1963. The Blackrock clan was the most affected by the beastmen being led astray. Among the three major clans of the tribe, the core clan that pushed for the interstellar expedition was also the Blackrock clan. It was also because most of the people of the Blackrock clan came out of the prison camps. Not only were the Blackrock warriors captured, but there were also many Blackrock beastmen who were born or grew up in the prison camps. Therefore, they were extremely disgusted with drinking things that belonged to demons or evil gods. Unfortunately, the flag they raised was regarded as a flag of rebellion, due to the great disparity in strength between the two sides, including the Frostwolf clan who responded to Thrall's call. Many beastmen who rushed over after hearing the news of the uprising were extinguished before they could reach the Trial Valley of Duroder, where the rebels were located. The warriors of the Blackrock clan struggled to resist the attacks of the Kukurong guards. However, just like how the demigod Cenarius couldn't withstand Grom Hellscream's frenzied attacks, and couldn't even use his divine power, the warriors of the Blackrock clan couldn't withstand the baleful aura of the Crown Guards, who had been strengthened by the power of Ashoka. Magath the Grim Totem brought an entire group of Tauren shamans and more than 500 warlocks to fight against Thrall. After a night of fighting, Garish announced that his guards had successfully defeated a rebellion and captured the rebel leaders, the former chieftain Thrall and warlord Varrock Salyafar. The warriors of the Frostwolf clan who received the news sped towards Agrima. Unfortunately, Garish was already guarding against the Frostwolf clan. He directly sent an army of 100,000 led by the Warsong clan in an attempt to wipe out the Frostwolf clan. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, the Frostwolf clan broke through the encirclement and hid in the abandoned Razor Swamp. Originally, Garish had planned to hold a grand execution, using the execution of Sar and Varrock as a declaration of his great power. The Alliance unknowingly launched an all-out attack. Woo-woo! A shrill air raid alarm sounded in Agrima. 15 years after the Dark Portal, Thrall of West Kalimdor didn't expect that the Alliance's technology would develop to such a terrifying level in just a dozen years. Agrima's location was quite good. To the west was the turbulent River of Wrath, and upstream was a dangerous canyon, so there was no need to worry about the water source being cut off. It was a full 100 kilometers to the east before they reached the coast. They didn't have to worry about the Alliance landing on land and going straight in, or being bombarded by the Alliance's ships. To the north were towering mountains that even birds could not cross. On the contrary, the beastmen were experts in mountain warfare. The beastmen's superiority over the humans in mountain warfare had been proven through the 2 battles at the Dark Portal. In the tribe's imagination, the real enemy would only come from the south. That was why the main gate of Orgrimmar, which faced the southern plains, was the most majestic and sturdy. Whether it was Sal or Brainless Roar, no one knew the original history. Under normal circumstances, Azhara would have been taken over by the Goblins' Rustwater Consortium. The Horde would open up a narrow and dangerous path from Orgrimmar to Azhara, merging the 2 areas together and making it even more difficult to attack. No matter which direction they attacked from, they would receive support from other places. However, the Horde would never know how many years and how many things Duque had prepared in order to conquer Agrima. After defeating the Burning Legion led by Archimonde in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, the Alliance had occupied Azhara first. Even if Azhara and Agrima were separated by tens of kilometers of towering mountains, it didn't matter. The key was that the source of the River of Wrath was in Azhara. Technically, the source was at the junction of Mount Hyjal, the Land of Fire, and Azhara. It didn't matter because all 3 areas were under the control of the Alliance. The amount of water in the River of Wrath was shocking. Just blocking it would only turn it into a dammed lake, causing Azhara to flood. If it didn't flood this place, it would destroy some Alliance territory. Duque had used bulldozers and other engineering teams early in the morning to open up 2 artificial rivers in Azhara. One was obvious. It would directly lead into Grey Valley and increase the amount of water in the forest. As long as it was used properly, the conservative Grey Valley could recover faster. The other one was dark, 50 meters wide, and the deepest one was 15 meters deep. After this artificial river was built, it had never been used. It was announced that it would be a maintenance plant for the flying fleet, but after the plan changed, it was shelved. They even built a series of huge factories on the river. Apart from the dam that had been secretly built at the mouth of the river, the cement walls and the dry riverbed looked no different from an unfinished construction site. With Duquesne's order, the dam opened, and the water level of the entire River of Wrath dropped. At the same time, the dam built on the River of Wrath began to slowly close. This way, not a single drop of water would flow back into the original River of Wrath. To prevent the dam from exploding, there were 3 such dams along the River of Wrath. Every dam was equipped with at least 10,000 special forces that were mixed with different types of troops. Without food, people could survive for 7 days just by drinking water. If people didn't have water, they would die in 3 days. The broken flow of the River of Wrath directly interrupted Gura's counterattack plan. As long as it was a living creature, it had to eat, drink, and poop. Even after drinking Yashaji's Blackheart water, the mutated beast men still couldn't lack water. The entire terrain of Duroder was a relatively flat plain. The broken flow of the River of Wrath also led to another consequence of seawater flowing back. The turbulent seawater poured back into the riverbed of the River of Wrath. The riverbed that seemed to be low had water again, but in fact, the salty seawater was even more destructive to the freshwater ecosystem. Of course, this was a story for another time. Originally, after receiving intelligence that the entire Barrenlands was being attacked by the Alliance's flying fleet from the west, south, and north, Brainless Roar had prepared an army of hundreds of thousands of mutated beastmen civilians, led by the Kukuran guards, ready to counterattack. With the water cut off, he could only passively change his plan. He would march the army north along the riverbed and go directly to the Kagathia fortress built in the easternmost part of Grey Valley during the conflict with the elves. In this life, because the conflict with the Alliance broke out very late, the current Kagathia was not the fortress in history. Now it was just a camp made of wood. Unfortunately, when the tribe had just stationed the vanguard of 50,000 people in, the entire fortress was immediately attacked by the Alliance's fortress, Turundis, from the northeast. The so-called trick was one set after another. Since Duque thought of this trick of breaking the water, he knew that the tribe would definitely counterattack. Not only did he upgrade Turundis to a fortress long ago, but he also set the shooting element long ago. He didn't lack anything, but the tribe came to him. Chapter 1964. As soon as the Horde's vanguard arrived, the highest level order from the Alliance command arrived. Send them to the sky. Let's have a look at the 800mm Gustav railway cannon. If an orc was affected by the explosion, it would probably fly at least 50 meters into the sky, within half a second in the form of spare parts. Then, it would scatter unevenly within a radius of 200 meters. The only reason the Alliance had left behind this fortress was to use it as a bait. Duroder was a wasteland full of dry red soil. Once the water supply was cut off, there wouldn't be much water unless it was a deep well that had been dug beforehand. In a situation where water and food were lacking, the troops sent to clear the way must be elites. The only people he could think of were Braindead Roar's Kukuran guards and the Warsong tribe. Duque was only half right. There were indeed some Warsong tribe and Kukuran guards, but most of them were soldiers from other smaller tribes. This was because the main force of the Warsong tribe had stayed behind to guard Agrima. Speaking of which, Thrall had great foresight. Even though there was a raging river at the entrance, he still spent a lot of effort to dig dozens of deep wells in the city. Therefore, after hearing that there was water in Agrima, a large number of refugees who had been dismissed and sent to the basin of the raging river swarmed back to Agrima. With trouble in their nest, the Kukuran guards and the main force of the Warsong tribe naturally couldn't leave. It felt more like they were treating the symptoms and not the root of the problem. If they didn't solve the water problem, a large number of mutated orcs would still die. Why did they have to focus on defending the city? Reality proved that people like William, who had once lost the capital, could feel a longing for their homeland. On the other hand, Duque, who had never considered himself to be a person of Stormwind, didn't have such a deep understanding. Forget it, there's no difference. Let's go straight to the second stage. On the night when the refugee wave broke out in Agrima, there was originally a horde army of 30,000. They took advantage of the darkness, thinking that the Alliance wouldn't be able to see them, and followed the dry riverbed of the raging river all the way to the Azhara region. Unfortunately, the Alliance's battleships launched an air raid and threw incendiary bombs at them. There was nothing more suitable than a canyon to set fire to. First, he threw an incendiary bomb at the head and tail of the orcs to seal off the road. Then, he threw diesel incendiary bombs along the riverbed. A meal of burnt orc meat was ready. After confirming that there were no horde reinforcements, the Alliance sent Naxxramas and thousands of flying warships to attack the Twilight Fortress in the middle of the barren lands. This sturdy fortress was guarded by the traitor Gujar during the Cataclysm, and after the Cataclysm, it became the core of the tribe's rule over the barren lands. No matter how sturdy a fortress was, it was still a product of the Olden Era. After the Alliance's weapons entered the modern era, all the fortresses built on the ground were proven to be unable to withstand the bombardment of modern bombs. Dwarves and gnomes are crazy. Modern 1,000mm cannons could no longer satisfy their delusions. Following the development of the 2,000-pound super bomb, a large bomb with a charge of 5 tons was quickly developed that could be thrown by modified flying transport ships as motherships. Soon, 5 tons could no longer satisfy the appetite of this group of crazy scientists. They directly made a hypothesis. If the Alliance obtained absolute air supremacy in the war, then could they use a super bomb with the largest gunpowder load? When asked if even the largest battleship could not carry the bomb, then what would be used to drop the bomb? The group of dwarves said in unison, "Are you stupid? Can't you use Naxxramas to drop the bomb?" This plan, taking advantage of the fact that Duque was struggling in other timelines, the damn dwarves linked up and finally passed the throne meeting. Thus, a super bomb with 100 tons of conventional TNT was born. In order not to cause a big explosion when the charge was loaded, the dwarves even had to painstakingly divide the explosive into 100 small compartments and detonate them separately. However, the theoretical explosive power of this super bomb was too high. Just thinking about it was too scary. If it exploded directly inside Naxxramas, the most important flying fortress of the Alliance would be destroyed first. In a rage, William ordered Jurban to add a bomb compartment outside the lowest outer deck of Naxxramas. If anything really happened, at least it would not be able to penetrate the outer armor of Naxxramas. It was not difficult to add a bomb compartment, but if such a large bomb was hit, it would still explode. Thus, the dwarves put in a lot of effort to add protective armor to the bomb compartment. As a result, Naxxramas, which was originally a little like a square box, had a huge conical bomb compartment at the bottom. It looked like Naxxramas had become a cylinder of ice cream. Now the cylinder had been thrown down, but the ice cream was still in the air. It was probably a delayed detonation fuse. Relying on the acceleration of gravity and its own weight, the super bomb, Baldy Strong, smashed directly above the Twilight Fortress, did not explode immediately. However, under the huge impact, it smashed through at least 10 floors in a row. When it reached the middle and lower parts of the fortress, there was an explosion. Fiery red flame patterns appeared densely on the black stone walls of the fortress that was filled with an ominous aura. Countless fire dragons began to erupt from every hole in the fortress. When a huge amount of flames leaked out of the fortress, the flames once again gathered into a huge cloud of fire, forming a destructive flame shock wave that spread in all directions, sweeping across the entire Great Rift Valley oasis. The huge fortress seemed to have suffered a terrible earthquake at this time. The fortress, which was more than 2 meters thick, was as fragile as sand. In less than 2 seconds, the whole fortress collapsed layer by layer like dominoes. Boom! Amidst the continuous roars, the fortress completely collapsed like a landslide. The sea of fire was pushed further away, and the whole area was under the flames, making creaking sounds. In order to block the offensive of the Alliance, Brainless Roar had painstakingly arranged an army of more than 300,000 orcs in the Twilight Fortress. Relying on the Twilight Fortress, they had built large and small blockhouses and positions. Despite the lack of air force, Brainless Roar firmly believed that the Alliance's infantry would bleed to the last drop of blood in front of this fortress. Because when he led the army to attack here, he also paid a heavy price. What made Brainless Roar angry was that the Alliance did not play by the rules at all. After clearing out the weak air force of the Horde, they directly let Naxxramas fly up to the Twilight Fortress and lay an egg. They directly blew up all the ugly orcs with a big bomb. In fact, this super bomb completely shattered Brainless Roar's fantasy. Chapter 1965. In Brainless Roar's imagination, this batch of 300,000 orcs could buy him at least half a year's time. Back then, the Twilight Fortress controlled by Google was not afraid of fire, nor was it afraid of the boulders of the catapults. It could only be filled with human lives. When the corpses of the Horde warriors filled every winding branch of the fortress, and even the Twilight believers did not have time to clean up the corpses, the Horde finally conquered the place. After all, the Forgotten Ones were still members of the Horde at that time. Google had ordered Dranos to resurrect every Horde warrior who had died in battle and fight for the Horde again. Sadly, Brainless Howl's lack of intelligence limited his imagination. He had never imagined that the Alliance would have such a big bomb. Street fighting? Not possible. Unless it was absolutely necessary. Who would let their soldiers fight in the narrow passageways of the fortress? That was a standard example of one man holding the pass against 10,000 enemies. Even if the Alliance had a large number of new Pandaren monks, they could not be used like this. Things can be solved with bombs. Don't King give me infantry. Our righteousness and strength only exist within the range of the cannons. This was how Duke lectured. The Alliance's use of a big bomb to destroy the Twilight Fortress caused the orcs to have a psychological collapse. Originally, when Naxxramas, which seemed to cover the entire sky, arrived above the fortress, most of the orc defenders had already felt that something was wrong. When the fortress collapsed, the orcs, who were known for their courage, actually deserted. Countless orc soldiers ran out of their hiding places in the bunkers or wooden towers. They screamed loudly and fled in all directions, just to get away from the explosion. It was a little too late. The bunkers closest to the fortress were all affected. The Twilight Fortress was not a fortress in the traditional sense. It was built by Google, using a large amount of earth elements from the deep rock continent. The purity and content of the earth elements were far beyond the imagination of mortals. The Horde did not know that such a strong fortress actually needed a large amount of earth elements to replenish on a daily basis. As Nasario died, Therazane, the Stone Mother, had already secretly extracted a large amount of earth elements from the Twilight Fortress. This made the Twilight Fortress even more like an empty shelf. Although it was an empty shelf, at least the mass of the fortress and the volume of the stones were there. When it was blasted away, the effect caused by the collapse of this terrifying fortress, which was over 100 meters tall, was simply on the level of a landslide. Within 100 meters of the fortress, all the orcs were buried alive, and everything within 1,000 meters was affected by the flames of the explosion. Those who were nearby, even if they were hiding in bunkers or bunkers, as long as they did not completely isolate themselves from the flames, they would immediately be burnt to a crisp by the all-pervasive waves of fire. Those who were further away were also burned by the flames. Naxxramas left after making a simple assessment of the damage. It headed northeast to meet up with the Dalajan and put on another show in Orgrimmar. As for cleaning up the battlefield, there was no need. The traditional method of excavation was too time-consuming, manpower, and resources. Other than the Alliance infantry, there was a vassal race that cleaned up the battlefield very cleanly, and that was the Karaji insect people. Be it the descendants of the burrowing bug Oro, or the bugmen who were adept at digging holes, they were the best choice to deal with the enemies underground. There were some things that the Alliance didn't want them to do. The orcs of the Twilight Fortress had not yet mutated. If they rashly started a massacre, especially by letting ordinary human soldiers do it, there would always be some Virgin Mary-type guys who jumped out. The insect magic was good, and if anything happened, one of the insect leaders would take the blame. If they were really pushed, they would say that they were not strict enough. Then there would be a Zerg leader, who cut his belly to apologize. Anyway, the most important thing in the Karaji insect people empire was the twin emperors. The emperor was fine, and it didn't matter how many bugs died below. There were almost no tribal refugees in the entire barren lands. All the refugees ran to the vicinity of Orgrimmar. The rest were nothing more than cannon fodder that Braindead Roar tried to use to slow down the alliance. Bunkers and medium and small fortresses were all over the barren lands. This would not be the goal of Naxxramas and the other main forces. The alliance, which already had detailed intelligence, sent squadrons of different sizes to sweep according to the size of each target, and arrange for mobile forces to support them. Bang! Amidst the roar of artillery, one fortress after another was blown into the sky. If it weren't for the splattered flesh and broken limbs, in the eyes of the Alliance soldiers, this was the simplest live-fire training. It had to be known that in training, in order to simulate the environment of artillery bombardment in a strong wind, the Alliance deliberately let the captains of each training ship drive the ship, as if they were drunk, shaking and tilting. The Alliance's standard was to have no less than 30% of the shells hit, within a radius of 100 meters of the target area, at a distance of 5,000 meters. Even with all kinds of auxiliary equipment, things like artillery bombardment could only be learned through a lot of live-fire training. Over the barren lands, the wind was often only level 1 or 2, the dry landscape good vision, and the wind was not strong. This was a typical example of combat being easier than training. The Alliance destroyed the Horde's strongholds from all fronts. Every Horde could clearly feel Duque's invisible big hands, which were tightly gripping their necks, waiting to crush their throats, and give a fatal blow. The Alliance's strangulation without leaving anyone alive intensified the panic of the Horde. Over 1 million Horde citizens and soldiers gathered at the gates of Orgrimmar, shouting to enter. In their hearts, the great city of Orgrimmar, which had never fallen before, was their only safe harbor. At this moment, Garrosh made a terrible decision. Close the gates. Everyone, whether Alliance or Horde, will be shot to death if they enter the range of arrows and cannons. What? They're all Horde citizens. Someone objected. Crack. The chieftain crushed the head of the opposition with a single hand on the spot. Garrosh's twisted face had the most terrifying viciousness. The Great Orthodox Horde doesn't need those weaklings. For billions of years, the beastmen have lived like this. I'm not a weak thrall. I won't waste useless food and resources on the weak. Those incompetent clans will be thrown into the wilderness to die. If they want to blame someone, blame it on having a weak chief, or the fact that they didn't inherit a strong bloodline. Ha ha ha. Crude and cruel, but it was the truth. For tens of thousands of years, the beastmen had gone through the cruelest elimination. If they couldn't win a group fight, they couldn't get the best hunting grounds. Without a good hunting ground, they wouldn't have enough prey to survive the harsh winter. If they couldn't survive, they would either destroy the other clans for resources, or die tragically under the fierce power of nature. This was the traditional beastmen, a typical beastman who followed the law of survival of the fittest. No traditional beastman found Garrosh's words wrong. Chapter 1966. But now the Horde was no longer the world of the traditional orcs. If it was in a closed environment like Draenor, not so many orcs would feel that Garrosh's orders were excessive. After the Great Migration, from the increasingly scarce resources of Nagran to the wider Kalimdor, the traditional orcs' views had actually begun to change under the guidance of the former chief Thrall. This was a clash of ideas. Many orcs felt that it was natural for them to be protected by the Horde. When they thought that the once brave and invincible, the wisest and greatest chief, Garrosh, actually made a move to abandon them, they broke down. Fear, violence, anger, bewilderment, confusion, hatred, and all sorts of other emotions intertwined among the refugees. But no one expected that these emotions would instead strengthen the combat power of the orcs, who had drunk the Yashaji Blackheart water. Because of the evil of fear, madness, anger, doubt, confusion, hate, and pride, the 7 evils of the Yashaji Blackheart water were born from the negative emotions and negative energy of humans. The mutated orcs became more burly, and more terrifying spikes grew out of every corner of their bodies. This scene stunned the top leaders of the Alliance, and even made Tyrion Fordring, who had once opposed the massacre, speechless. In Naxxramas, Duque sat in the seat of the chief commander. In front of the magic mirror image, Duque said calmly, "Now, does anyone else have any objections to my proposal of an eye for an eye?" The leaders of the throne conference were silent. This was not because they were silently resisting, but because the next scene made them eager to try. It was just that they didn't want to destroy the harmonious atmosphere. So no hothead jumped out and said things like, "If there's no objection, then let's do it. I'll count down from 5. Those who object, please provide sufficient reasons. If there are no objections, then it will be regarded as a unanimous vote by the throne meeting." Duque announced, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I, in the name of the chief commander of the Alliance, announce the execution of the operation to destroy Orgrimmar. Operation code: Focusing Rainbow. It didn't matter if the focusing rainbow in this life was provided by the Alliance. The cruelty of the weapon was not the fault of the weapon itself, but the fault of the person who pressed the firing button and made the decision to use the destructive weapon. It was Garrosh who had tried to destroy the Alliance, and it was the will of the entire tribe who had elected Garrosh to become the great chief. Now, Theon's emotions were extremely complicated as he watched the innocent orc populace mutate under the influence of Gurus, using the people's negative emotions to catalyze the mutation. It was too late. Perhaps they were once innocent. It was precisely because they wanted to become more relaxed and follow a powerful leader, without thinking that they could simply obtain more territory and resources and live a better life that they wanted, in the end, had the opposite effect. By believing in the brainless roar, not only did he not gain more, but he also lost himself in it. Everyone could see that this level of mutation was not something that could be changed back after 8 to 10 years in the prison camp. This was a completely different kind of evil creature that could not be saved. The Alliance's action to destroy Twilight Fortress shocked the entire tribe. When Gurish realized that it was impossible for him to hold on just by relying on defense, he finally unleashed another move. Mantis Man. Since ancient times, there had always been some races that were obsessed with the power of the ancient gods and refused to repent. For example, the Faceless or the Mantis Man. In a surveillance image brought by the Magic Network's connection to the Mage's Eye, it was as if a horror movie was playing. Whoa, gulp gulp. With a strange sound, a Mantis Man was transforming. This 3-meter-tall Mantis Man not only swelled like a balloon, but his pair of scythe-like forelimbs were F***king turning into scythes. The green biological blades had a frightening luster. It seemed that this guy was stimulated by the power of Yasha and was strengthening in all aspects. A simple change in size wouldn't bring any threat to the Alliance. As for the qualitative change, that was another matter altogether. F***ck. What the hell is this? Bulang Bronzebeard burst out cursing. In the image, the enlarged Mantis Man began to grow wings. The rather transparent green wings had the structure of a cicada's wings. Not only the wings, but the entire Mantis Man's back was transforming and evolving, producing the back muscle tissue unique to flying insects. Whoosh, whoosh, buzz buzz buzz. From the initial fan-like flapping to the high-speed flapping of hummingbird-like wings, it only took 2 to 3 seconds to accelerate. However, the huge Mantis Man leaped into the air and darted into the sky. We're in big trouble. William was the first to frown. Yes, faster than all the air forces we have now, Cudrin Wildhammer concluded. Cudrin Wildhammer, the commander of the Alliance's Air Force, concluded and added, "Damn it, only my Scarlet can keep up with these flying mantises' movements." The Alliance leaders made noises, as if they were having a toothache. If it's just the Air Force, I'm afraid only the Dragon Army can deal with them, right? At this moment Duque said, Jaina Kale, that's don't look with mortal eyes, use the elemental eyes. Finally, the two Pharaoh of the Alliance saw it. As expected, Kale, that's confirmed Duque's judgment. That's the shadow elemental energy line, connected to Yasha's heart of Yasha, Jaina followed. There's no time to hesitate. Let's go directly crush them and end everything. Duque made the decision. Everyone was amazed by the awesomeness of the ancient gods. In a sense, they were the true masters of biochemistry. They could always use their evil powers to create a bunch of messy biochemical combat weapons. Those things might affect the appearance of the city, but their combat power was very strong. In fact, this also proved Duque's judgment. When the Alliance's air fleet encountered this batch of enemies that could fly up to 80 kilometers per hour and had abnormally high mobility, everyone was clearly not used to it. Although the air fleet lined up in a neat three-dimensional formation and used dense cannons to block the attacks of the flying mantises, the effect was not very good. Hundreds and thousands of flying mantises broke through the dense formation of anti-aircraft cannons and killed their way into the gaps between the ships. Although this was included in the training for the enemy's invasion, the Alliance's air fleet still encountered various problems. For example, they did not dare to shoot at the enemies between the anti-aircraft cannons and friendly warships. When they saw the flying mantises on the deck, they actually forgot to switch weapons and foolishly tried to turn the anti-aircraft cannons around, resulting in them being killed on the turrets. Those flying mantises could even use their sharp sickle forelimbs to cut through the protective armor of the destroyer while flying at high speed. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Queen Sylvie, who could not stand it anymore, decisively summoned the Wind Elemental Army into the battle. Chapter 1967. If it had been the previous two critical times, such as during the Wrath of the Lich King period, perhaps the flying mantis would have been useful. Now let's just forget about it. The Alliance's anti-air cannons might have been broken through. In fact, this was only the outermost circle. A mature commander would never allow his army to lack layers and buffers. If he had to link all the troops together and trap all of them, then this commander could be shot. Not only the outermost circle was affected, but also the newbie troops, which were mainly rookies. Think about it. The Wrath of the Lich King and the Wings of Chaos were so coherent. How long had it been since then? Less than 10 years. Most of the veterans who had experienced the last two wars were now lieutenants and sergeants. With them leading, how weak could the Alliance fleet be? To put it bluntly, this was Duque deliberately letting the Alliance military train their troops. If they couldn't even deal with an enemy of this level, then they shouldn't fight against the overwhelming air force of the Burning Legion. Since they were going to lose anyway, they might as well cut their throats and die a clean death. The Wind Elemental Army entered the battlefield, but they didn't participate in the battle. Thousands of huge wind elementals hovered in the air and stared at the front with their dark and unclear eyes. This was the way the military bigwigs expressed their dissatisfaction. Can you little bastards do it? If you can't, then let's go. The veterans who were middle and lower ranking officers in front of them immediately lost their composure and started cursing loudly. Noob, they're already in front of you. What are you waiting for? Change your weapons. Are the rocket launchers in the turrets just decorations? Idiot. Can't you cover your teammates and shoot their butts with the anti-air cannons if you can't hit them? Trash. All of you are trash. This is your last chance. If you can't form an AA anti-air firepower net, then get the F*CK back to the reserves, and your official establishment will be revoked. After Duke became the commander-in-chief of the Alliance, he spent 15 years to make the entire Alliance flourish. Not only did he adjust the Alliance to be able to switch between the two economic forms at any time, but he also greatly improved the status of the Alliance soldiers. Those who had served in the army, as long as they retired normally, not only would they be able to take care of the old, the weak, the sick and the disabled, but they would also receive all kinds of enviable benefits. After retiring from the military, there would be all kinds of free skills training. After completing their studies, they would be assigned a job. As long as they didn't slack off on purpose, they would be guaranteed a salary that was 30% higher than the average salary in society. Apart from that, there were other benefits that could be accumulated. Different bonuses were distributed according to the rank of the officers and the battles they had participated in. For example, those who fought against no cent would receive no cent mining dividends, which could be distributed until the soldier died. During the Cataclysm, those who fought in the Dragon Slumber Temple received the Twilight Dragon Leather Company limited share dividends. Once you get married, you can enjoy tax deductions. In principle, as long as the child was healthy, it wouldn't cost much for the child to grow up to 18 years old. The Alliance's allowance covered most of the expenses. The worst part was that the Alliance encouraged soldiers to marry 2 wives. Dew, who had a guilty conscience, signed a special decree. Active and retired soldiers who married 2 wives and had 4 or more children would receive special subsidies. It was a monthly subsidy that was enough to make ordinary people envious. Children can be raised until they reach the age of 16, when they gradually reduce to a reasonable level. At the same time, the Alliance definitely didn't raise lazy people. If a retired soldier had the ability to work and was under the age of 60, he didn't want to work and had money to spend. Sorry, all the subsidies would not be issued. It was this multi-layered blessing of glory, responsibility, and welfare that forged the lofty status of the Alliance soldiers today. As soon as he said that they should go back to the reserves, the recruits were suddenly shocked. Then, as if they were on steroids, they began to perform exceptionally well. Bang! 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 The 2 barrels of the twin 113mm anti-aircraft cannon roared. This large-caliber anti-aircraft cannon had the longest range, the highest muzzle velocity, and the strongest destructive power among today's anti-aircraft cannons. As long as it was hit, the 5-meter-tall Mantis would be like a kite struck by a machete. It would be directly torn apart in midair, turning into smelly limbs and flesh. The new improved version of the twin 40mm Bofors SDAG anti-aircraft cannon had a super high firing rate of 0.8 seconds per round. It was the pinnacle of today's Azeroth military industry. This kind of anti-aircraft cannon with a shorter range was responsible for creating a terrible metal storm in the air within a 2-kilometer range, turning all the approaching flying mantises into pieces. The more the anti-aircraft cannons got into the zone, the more daring they were to shoot. There were even some guys with excellent artillery skills who dared to shoot the dead zone between the ships. As long as it wasn't aimed at the upper deck of their own ship, the 40mm anti-aircraft cannon couldn't penetrate the thick side of the ship. Instead, it could kill the Mantis that was about to reach the ship. Of course, there were also people who would take care of the Mantis that actually reached the ship. After all, this was a world where magic and technology coexisted. On every Alliance warship, there was a counter-assault team with different levels of professionals in proportion to eliminate the enemy powerhouses that reached the ship. The Mantis that was on steroids could be considered powerhouses for the time being. At the very least, ordinary Alliance soldiers who only knew how to use guns and cannons couldn't deal with them. Seeing that the Alliance's rookies had finally stabilized the battle line, Queen CIA's cold expression softened a little. She hooked her finger behind her, and her third sister immediately understood. The Queen has ordered the 4th and 5th Wind Elemental Legions to temporarily retreat. The defeat of these creatures that could already be called Mantis demons, and the incomparably pitiful Horde airships that were forced to fight by the brainless roar in the sky above Orgrimmar, turned into fireballs and crashed. This made the Horde like a vicious dog that was forced into a corner and could only bark frighteningly, unable to do anything else. The last step of the focusing rainbow operation, activate, Duque said softly. It's time to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. With so much foreshadowing, of course the orcs were finished. 30 years ago, the orcs invaded Azeroth, opening the prelude to war and destruction. Duque definitely wanted to end all of this. As a transmigrator, how could he not know that Gurus had built a huge underground military fortress in the Raging Flame Rift in Orgrimmar's Dark Alley area? For ordinary enemies, Duque might as well let the Alliance train their troops and attack them or something. After all, after the death of the idiot Lich King, the Alliance didn't have any decent attacks. If the goal was total annihilation, then there wouldn't be so much trouble. In the sky, the Dalajan was blocking the southeast, and Naxxramas was approaching from the northwest. Chapter 1968. Looking down from the sky, one could see that this was like a hunt. With the two sky fortresses as the core, the Alliance's fleet began to bombard all the tribal targets around them. As long as they saw a humanoid creature, they would immediately fire a cannonball. The cannons were at least 100 millimeters in diameter or machine guns. On the ground, countless elemental creatures appeared. It was the Fire Elemental Army commanded by Majordomo Executus. With the inverted triangular-shaped Fat Fire Elemental as the main force, more than 100,000 elemental creatures slowly advanced, burning everything they could see. The Alliance finally sent in land troops, allowing Agrima's mutated orc army to finally have a place to fight. Aha! They let out muffled, inhuman howls as they charged crazily at the fire elementals. If they subconsciously looked down, they would see colorful insects crawling out from all corners of the dry and cracked red earth, fleeing in all directions with the goal of leaving Agrima. Unfortunately, after being transformed by the black heart water in Yashaji's heart, they could no longer be called normal creatures. Not only did the mutated orcs' bodies become uglier, but Yashaji's negative emotional energy also poured into their minds. There was no right or wrong, no self-will, only rage or fear that needed to be vented. What they met head-on was a huge wave of flames created by thousands of fire elementals. The 10-meter-tall wave of flames advanced at every moment, spewing tongues of flame that could burn everything. There was no pity, no hesitation. These fire elementals with weak self-will faithfully carried out their commander's orders. The highly intelligent fire demons were behind them, ordering them around. Something that had never happened in the past 10,000 years was a large group of earth elemental creatures acting as the fire demons' bodyguards. Not every mutated orc had such a violent spirit. Yashaji's negative emotions were diverse. There were mutated orcs who charged to their deaths out of fear, and there were orcs who retreated out of fear. These mutated orcs who had lost their courage screamed, and used their sharpened claws to dig into Agrima's towering brick and wood walls, quickly climbing over. Many of them even broke through the walls supervised by the Kukuran guards, and escaped into Agrima. They crazily slaughtered any creature that stood in their way. This caused new chaos. Despair, terror, panic, doubt. The pros and cons of the seven fiends were all revealed at this moment. Just as the orthodox tribe of Orgrimmar fell into chaos, Naxxramas finally arrived at the top of Kalimdor's largest city, which had been built for 15 years, and was hailed as the symbol of the tribe's spirit. Orgrimmar was so huge that it almost occupied the entire northern part of Duroder. In real life, Orgrimmar wasn't a small town that could be reached in a few minutes on horseback. Under the management of 2 generations of great chieftains, Orgrimmar was 12 kilometers long from east to west and 8 kilometers wide from north to south. Due to the mountains behind it, the zigzagging city boundaries made it difficult to calculate the area. It was this city that was close to 100 square kilometers that was now under the Alliance's siege. Every single orc who was still sane cried out in alarm when the flying fortress's shadow covered half of the city. They could hear their voices breaking with fear. They could sense the animosity from the Alliance. There was no persuasion, no propaganda. Everything was different from what they knew of the Alliance. They still remembered when Sar was great chieftain. The Alliance gave him almost unreserved support. If there was no food, they would give him food. If there was an injury or illness, they could borrow priests and doctors to cure their addiction to the devil's blood. When Sar said he wanted to go to Nagran to save people, the Alliance gave him a ship without hesitation. The Alliance used to be so kind. Unfortunately, their unwillingness blinded their hearts. They envied the good life of the Alliance people to the point of going crazy, and their ambition fueled their arrogance. At this time, a madman who advocated war resonated with their hearts. Yes, if there was no food, no territory, then they would just rob. Everything was so natural. They raised the banner of tradition and followed the madman to start the war. They saw the Alliance's retreat as weakness, and the small benefits they seized as the prelude to victory. When the Alliance revealed its fiercest claws, the group of orcs who were frogs at the bottom of a well discovered that they seemed to have provoked an opponent that they absolutely could not provoke. Was Garrosh wrong to be great chieftain? Did we make a big mistake? We shouldn't have declared war on the Alliance. Ancestor, is Orgrimmar going to be destroyed? Are we going to die? Are the orcs going to be finished? All kinds of negative emotions spread throughout the city, and screams rose and fell continuously. Other than the rough and angry shouts of the Kyukuron guards, there was weakness everywhere. So what if Yashaji gave them a stronger body? They couldn't fly. This situation where they couldn't even resist, not even put up a last fight, was what made the orcs feel the most despair. Under the despairing gazes of nearly 1 million orcs, the huge base of Naxxramas that destroyed the Twilight Fortress fell off another layer. Everyone watched in horror as the huge black metal block that was bigger than 10 chieftain halls fell from the sky, aiming at the dark alley in the center of the city. Boom! Boom! It was a loud noise that could shatter the sky and the earth. Every pebble on the ground of Orgrimmar trembled, and in the next moment, they were directly shaken into the sky by the vibration. After being stepped on by countless people, the already solid ground was like a domino. After shattering into countless small pieces, it flew rapidly. From the inside out, it spread all the way. In the next moment, it caused the most exaggerated explosion in Orgrimmar's history. It was a dazzling light that could blind people's eyes. The ear-piercing buzzing made everyone lose their hearing and balance, and their ears were filled with buzzing sounds. After a moment of dizziness, the strongest survivors barely opened their eyes, only to find that in that instant, the explosion had destroyed most of the city, and all the buildings were directly blown away. Dozens of streets were all razed to the ground, and every ruin was screaming and groaning in the flames. The raging fire that engulfed the entire city spread further with the wind blowing from the east to the west. The city that was once full of orc aesthetics was now completely gone, and there were shocking cracks everywhere, as if it had experienced a terrible earthquake. No, even an earthquake couldn't have such amazing destructive power. This was a complete annihilation of the orcs. The remaining orcs had not yet reacted to this earth-shattering explosion when they immediately felt the ground start to shake again. What was this? Chapter 1969. The scorching air current carried the shockwave of the explosion and blew General Nazgûl, who had just climbed up from the ground, away. As burly as he was blown away in the stronghold deep underground and tumbled a few times. One could imagine how terrifying the attack power of the big bomb was. A large area of the underground stronghold collapsed. When the stronghold was built, there was no expectation of such a terrifying impact. The orcs were only wary of the Alliance's demolition team, but they didn't think that the Alliance would throw a fake tactical nuclear bomb. Nazgûl crashed through several walls, and finally stopped when he hit a rock stratum. His whole body slammed into it, and then he fell into a crack in the rock stratum that was 5 stories high. His body, which had been greatly strengthened by Yashaji's power, was not invincible. He covered his bleeding forehead and climbed up from the ground. He immediately noticed that the stones on the ground were spinning strangely, as if they were dancing some ridiculous dance. The shockwave from the explosion had clearly stopped, although the center of the explosion had ignited a fire. But the temperature under his feet was no less than the center of the explosion. No, this was even worse than that. Gurus Hellscream finally noticed the anomaly as well. The air was filled with the familiar smell of sulfur. It was as if he was in a dragon's lair, and was being stared at by an adult ancient dragon. The dragon's breath was so hot that it seemed to be able to burn everything. The dragon's mouth was filled with flames that seemed to be able to burn everything. He had been building his underground stronghold ever since he became the great chieftain. For this stronghold, he had taken away a large number of laborers from various races. And Magatha had helped him transfer these laborers in the name of fighting against the Alliance. The huge underground stronghold was very, very deep. Even a 100-ton bomb like this couldn't blow through and collapse the entire stronghold. Perhaps the layers closest to the ground would become a mess, but as long as the deepest underground palace was fine, Gurus was confident that he could use this underground stronghold to kill all the Alliance invaders and drain every drop of blood from their bodies. At that moment, Gurush felt two pairs of eyes on him. It was the gaze of Duke Marcus, whom he hated the most. It was as if there was a holy elephant of Duque standing in the middle of a temple in the void, and Duque was holding his father's shackles with one hand, while staring at him with a mocking gaze. There was even a hateful smile on his face, as if he was looking at a clown. Duke Marcus, I know you're watching. Come at me if you can. Come and kill me. The Kyukuron guards looked at their boss, dumbfounded, as though they had gone crazy for no reason. In fact, it seemed to everyone that Gurush was a little jumpy lately. This time it was different. A voice really came from the void. It was the voice of their strongest enemy. Kill you? I will. But I'm not interested in crawling into a rat hole and pulling out such a dirty person like you. Duque's voice rang out. It sounded like an ethereal voice coming from a tall building in the morning mist. It was full of hallucinatory colors, but every word was clear. What? You dare to call such a majestic fortress a rat hole? The brainless roar exploded. Duque did not answer him. Instead he mocked. You know what? When a ship is about to sink, the first thing to run out is definitely a rat. Hey, what do you mean? Answer me, you bastard Duque. Gurush roared angrily, but received no response. No, that was not entirely true. Duque responded in another way. Rumble, rumble. The entire Orgrimmar trembled. Even the entire mountain range that Orgrimmar was attached to was trembling. The terrifying heat began to scorch the lowest level of the underground fortress. Ah, so hot. So hot. The Kyukuron guards who drank the Yasha Blackheart water were not immune to elemental damage, nor did they completely cut off their sense of pain. They were still living creatures. They could be hurt, afraid of pain, and they could die. When the lowest level of the underground fortress was torn apart like a fragile biscuit by the sudden appearance of the underground camp, Duque's trump card finally showed its brilliance. Bang! It was lava with a temperature of nearly 1,200 degrees Celsius. And it was definitely not normal fire elemental energy. The flames were violent, and the temperature was as high as 8,000 degrees Celsius. Ah, not good. Run. If we don't run, we'll be burned to death. If it was any other situation, perhaps the brainless roar would have killed a few deserters on the spot to warn the others. Unfortunately, in the face of such unreasonable heat, if they did not want to be burnt to a crisp, the only way was to run. Just as Duque had mocked, they ran towards the ground. At this time, the brainless roar finally understood how Duque had done it. No one would have the imagination to imagine that the Lord of Fire, Duque, would be so generous. Duque had directly pumped a large amount of lava from the land of fire south of Mount Hyjal, through a tunnel dug by Oro's children, through half of Azhara, and into Agrima. If Duque was a true god, perhaps he would have done what the will of Azeroth had done, and used the lava from the deepest part of the planet to destroy Agrima. Unfortunately, Duque was not, so he could only settle for the next best thing, and use the lava from the land of fire to destroy Agrima. The earth rose in the midst of the rumbling. The tribesmen in the ruins of Orgrimmar did not die immediately. Like the snakes, rats, and ants, they desperately tried to escape the city that they wanted to protect with their lives just a day ago. They screamed and cried. They could not bear the sorrow, pain, and fear in their hearts. In the face of such an apocalyptic disaster, the power of mortals was so insignificant and powerless. Bang! 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 A new crimson mountain replaced Orgrimmar. It grew taller and taller, spewing lava and thick black smoke in all directions. The lava that flowed out of the volcano destroyed everything in its path, whether it was the once majestic palace, the sturdy city walls, or the lifeless bodies. After dropping the bomb, Naxxramas, the Dalajan, and the Alliance fleet had already left the sky above Agrima at full speed. The nearest airship was 3 kilometers away from Naxxramas. At this time, almost all the big shots of the Alliance had gathered in Naxxramas. They were not projections but in person. Everyone had come under Duque's invitation to witness the destruction of the Horde. Duque's gaze seemed to look beyond the present and into the future. His voice was filled with a sense of holiness and determination. Once Agrima represented the rebirth of the Orcs, the rise of the new Horde, and the freedom from the control of the Alliance. In the past, strong enemies were waiting, and the Alliance had no chance to act. Now, the Alliance will take this opportunity to completely destroy the symbolic capital of the Horde. Chapter 1970. Be it now or in the future, even if the Beastmen have the chance to set foot on this land again, they won't be able to rebuild their city in its original location. This time, we will use the destruction of Agrima to tell any intelligent race on planet Azeroth that whoever dares to follow the Burning Legion or the ancient gods will be wiped off the face of the planet by the Alliance. Kill them all. Leave none alive. Duque declared as the commander of the Alliance. Whoever wants to destroy the planet and make it impossible for everyone to live, we will kill them first. No. Care. Yes. Who? Just then, an even more powerful wave of lava spewed out from the crater. Dazzling flames exploded in the middle of the battlefield. It was a flare brighter than the sun. At the same time, countless roaring lava balls flew out, dragging more land into the burning world of fire. This was not a planet-level attack. The lava in the land of fire was not endless. Seeing that it was about time, Duque ordered the land of fire to stop. Agrima and Garish's underground strongholds were destroyed together. But Garish was not done yet. High energy response. It's a shadow element. Enemy attack. The messenger's voice turned from surprised to fierce. This time, there was no need for the messenger to report. All the big shots of the Alliance saw that in the airspace ahead, a scouting frigate had been destroyed by a shadow element light cannon. Boom! The dazzling light caused the dimmed battlefield to suddenly light up again. It was as if night had turned into day in an instant. Duque pursed his lips. Sally broadcasted to the whole Alliance, including those families. Sally understood what Duque was implying. At this time, countless people in the Eastern Kingdom, and in the backlands waiting for news from the front lines, were pleasantly surprised to see the magic mirrors in the squares suddenly change. The Battle of Agrima was the most important thing for everyone. Due to the information restrictions, everyone could only see the situation in the backlands. News about Duroder was not allowed to be reported. On the screen, a giant wind city of the tribe was being destroyed by a volcano. People of the Alliance rejoice. During the siege of the Horde's capital Orgrimmar, during Operation Focusing Rainbow, the Alliance dropped a super bomb made of 100 tons of TNT on the Horde. The commander of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, even summoned a terrifying volcano to destroy the Horde's capital Orgrimmar. Everyone please take a look. Back then, the Alliance lent the Horde a ship to cross the endless sea to the west. Then, the Horde spent 15 years building the main city of Orgrimmar on this red land. It's now history. However, we used magic bombs to destroy Theramore and spread the flames of war to every member of the Alliance. The main culprit, Gurus Hellscream, who calls himself the chief of the Orthodox tribes, has yet to be executed. On the screen, dazzling flames had already exploded in the center of the battlefield. There was no need for the higher-ups of the Alliance to give the order. The fleets at the front line were already attacking the enemy. Following the roar of the 400mm and above cannons, a mushroom cloud rose up from the red earth, bringing with it an endless amount of smoke and dust. The shockwave pushed the reddish-brown dust cloud over, blowing away tons of dust and debris. Soon, everyone saw a huge black shield rise around a huge figure, blocking all the explosions, dust, and shockwaves outside. That was the power of Yashaji. A higher level of mystery easily rejected the low-level energy reaction. Each heavy cannon weighed more than a ton, and nearly 100 kilograms of gunpowder. However, the terrifying explosive power that could blast a 5-story tall tower into the sky was still unable to do anything to the black light shield on Garush's body. Facing the direct attack of the cannons, the shield only bent slightly and shook for half a second before returning to normal. They noticed that beside Garush, a huge, ugly heart was beating powerfully. The broken blood vessels of the heart were like a whirlpool, crazily absorbing evil nutrients from the surrounding air. The despair of the Horde members before they died, the wails of their souls, and their painful mental fluctuations. All the negative emotions became nourishment for Yashaji's heart. After being transformed by the heart, it was injected into Gurus' body. Although Gurus rushed out of the underground fortress in an extremely disheveled appearance, with more than a dozen charred places on his body, he was ruthless to others and also to himself. He actually used bloodhowl to cut off the injured parts of his body. Then, in the high magnified vision of the magician's eyes, his damaged muscles were like wriggling earthworms, connecting together and healing at a speed 100 times faster than normal. Ugh! Many of the Alliance civilians who saw this scene retched. In the command hall of Naxxramas, Duque stood up calmly. It's time. Let's end this. The Alliance's heroes were mobilized for the first time in a long time. Whenever conventional combat power could not defeat the enemy, it was time for the heroes to go out. They were both the leaders of the Alliance and the glory of the Alliance. Looking at the Alliance leaders gathered in front of the portal, the soldiers in the command hall stood up in unison, saluted, and gave the highest respect and blessings to the heroes who were about to go out to battle. This time, Duque could use Otter's guardians, or the 5 guardian dragons of the Dragon Sleep Temple. He gave up this right. For no reason. He just wanted to put an end to the 30-year war and grievances between the Alliance and the Horde. As a member of the Alliance. As for Brainless Roar, Duque had already cut him down too much. It wasn't to say that he had cut him down to a dog, but this was no longer an equal battle. In this life, there was no great uprising of the Horde. Thrall might have tried, but Thrall, he should have died in the volcanic eruption. Duque didn't have time to sigh. If he could use the volcano move, he had no intention of leaving anyone alive. In the original time and space, the Battle of Orgrimmar, the ultimate dungeon in the Mystery of Pandaria time point, had as many as 14 bosses, a considerable number of which were war machines made by goblin craftsmen. Now Duque couldn't see any of them. In order to prevent the Alliance from invading with mechanized troops, a certain brainless person deliberately made the entrance and exit of the underground stronghold very narrow. In the end, not only did he fail to trick the Alliance, but he also tricked himself in the volcanic eruption scenario. Now there were only 5 bosses left, which was really hilarious. Seeing Duque and his party appear, Gurus let out a deafening roar. Duke Marcus, you despicable person! Don't you dare to fight me fair and square? Sure, first throw away that piece of rotten meat next to you called Yashaji. How about we fight fair and square? The corner of Duque's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Chapter 1971. A fair duel was a joke. This was more like the weak hoping to use moral coercion, to ask the strong to deliberately pull their combat power to the same level as the weak. In reality, even if the real strong lowered their power level, they could still achieve victory through their rich experience and unconstrained fighting methods. Different races, different backgrounds, different experiences, different ways of growing up. There were too many differences that created a myriad of differences in individuals. With such differences, how could there be fairness? Speaking of which, I do moke, transmigrated openly and relied on my own memory, wisdom, and power to fight to this day. Why should I give up my advantage and fight you openly? What a joke! Duque's disdain could be conveyed to Brainless Roar without words. You destroyed my tribe, you bastard. Why can you steal the power of an elemental lord, but I can't use the power of an ancient god? Brainless Roar roared and shot Duque with a light cannon. The terrifying mental energy that lingered on the battlefield was too majestic. There was no need to deliberately collect it to create a huge amount. The huge and thick black energy cannon was terrifying the moment it was fired. It could probably stuff a destroyer into it. Duque did not make a move. A golden and benevolent figure appeared beside Duque. It was the former Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's Fail. He raised a golden staff that was in the shape of a cross, and had a ring on the top of the staff at the right time. Blessing, the classic staff of a priest. As a heroic spirit that relied on the magic net, Alonso's could change his shape, or the appearance of his equipment at will. This was the simplest transmogrification. But what he liked the most was this staff that had a special meaning to priests. The era when this staff was created had a special meaning to him. It was the most glorious era of the Holy Knight profession that he had single-handedly created. Blessing glowed with holy light and formed a huge hemispherical light shield that blocked in front of Duque. All the dark power that poured down was refracted and reflected away, dissipating in the air. Brainless Roar did not know that this scene was being broadcasted to the entire alliance and the various races that had joined the Horde. Perhaps to him power was power. There was no distinction between attributes, nobility, or lowness, only strength and weakness. Having always believed in the traditional concept that history was written by the victors, Garush's way of thinking was simpler and more violent. If he had the upper hand, there was nothing wrong with him doing so. Unfortunately, he wasn't. Without any scruples, he was now covered in a black aura, and any random move he made would sound like the howling of a chilly wind. No matter how one looked at it, he was the ultimate representative of a major villain. Originally in history, for the sake of justice and rules, the Alliance and the Pandaren organized a grand trial. Braindead Howl had killed so many people, committed war crimes, and even played the ancient god Yashaji. Braindead Howl, who had committed such a huge crime, had no choice but to give face to the tribe and only be sentenced to life imprisonment. In the end, he still managed to escape. Please forgive me for not being able to accept such moronic and idiotic behavior. The live broadcast of the duel was, in fact, a public trial. Since there was no tribe in the way, as long as Brainless Roar fully demonstrated his actions, then justice would be achieved. There would be no mercy. The outcome of this trial had long been decided. Duque was just going through the motions. The tribe has existed for more than 30 years. It's time for a grand curtain call, Duque said calmly in his heart. On the other side, Braindead Howl's light cannon could not deal with Duque. His loyal subordinates roared and pounced on him. General Nazgûl, Markorok, Siege Craftsman Black Isada. These Horde bosses, who had escaped the fate of being destroyed along with the underground fortress, continued to show their loyalty. For the Horde, General Nazgûl roared and rushed over. For the Alliance, the one who faced him was not his old rival General Taylor. Sorry, Taylor was not qualified to appear in such an occasion. In front of him was Tyrion Fordring. Tyrion, who was often teased by Duque as His Majesty, was not considered old. He was in his early 50s, and despite his white hair, he was still quite good at fighting. Nazgûl had not been specially enhanced. He was still a pure orc warrior. His strength came from his experiences. It was rare that Tyrion did not use his surging holy light to blast Nazgûl with Ashbringer. Right now, the Empress Dowager was more like a warrior, fighting Nazgûl with the simplest of skills. In terms of seniority, Nazgûl should not have been the one to challenge Tyrion. After all, he was now the chief paladin of the Alliance. He and his Ashbringer had become one of the benchmarks of the Alliance. Just like how Duque had come down to fight Braindead Howl, this battle that was about to destroy the Horde had a special meaning to it. This was the privilege of the older generation of the Alliance, who had directly endured the invasion of the orcs. They had risen during the second battle at the Dark Portal, and became the core of the Alliance. Now that the Horde was about to end, they had to personally wrap things up. That was why the one who blocked Markorok was Gavin Rad. His wind sword had become slightly weaker because Queen Sylvanas had freed Prince Thunderin and wanted to take him in as her subordinate. Gavin Rad temporarily replaced his wind sword. But even with the most ordinary of hammers, he could still suppress Markorok with the skills he had learned on the battlefield for 30 years. Moreover, This shameless thing still had different ideas from the other 5 silver saints. After failing to sleep with 2 women at night, Gavin Rad obediently submitted to Duque and obtained eternal life. Now he was more like a bug. He had the body of an 18-year-old, the experience of a 50-year-old, and the ability to combine holy light and lightning attacks at the same time. Even after Markorok had been strengthened by Asha's power, he was still being suppressed by Gavin Rad with an epic hammer. Dressed in golden plate armor, Gavin Rad merely dodged to the side and avoided Markorok's sweeping attack by a hair's breadth. The next second, a hammer hit the Gurus adjutant's face. Holy light mixed with lightning exploded on Markorok's enlarged face, and violent elemental turbulence swept across the red ground. Markorok's giant body was sent flying more than 10 meters away by the impact of the hammer. Only after rolling a few times did he finally stop, amidst the shocked cries of the Kyukuron guards. "Yo kid, you followed the wrong boss. People who use such evil powers will not have a good ending." Gavin Rad mocked. "You know nothing about the Horde." Markorok let out an angry roar and charged at Gavin Rad again. Chapter 1972. There was no chance to bring out the large war machines that Garush had prepared in the underground fortress. For example, the Iron Battle Scorpion. Similarly, in this life, Dukmu did not give brainless Roar enough time to corrupt the entire Splendid Valley, so there was no Fallen Guardian group of bosses in history. In addition, Duque drove the Horde to Pandaria, so brainless Roar had no time to do any side quests, so there was no bloodthirsty Sock, the primitive dinosaur boss that was brought back from the giant beast island. Apart from a few die-hard followers around Garush, he still made some achievements like in history. For example, the Dragon Maw clan that had revived the Horde. In this life, the Dragon Maw clan declined with the death of the patriarch Zuluhid in the World War II. It was not until the Cataclysm that the Dragon Maw clan returned to the stage of history after Garush destroyed the Twilight Fortress in the Barren Lands. Overseer Zyra and Garush formed a very close relationship during the Twilight Highlands incident, and she and her Dragon Maw orc promised loyalty to Garush's cause. The terrifying ancestor dragon Garush was a direct descendant of the dragon race's Cataclysm ancestor. Zyra rode on its back and appeared in front of the Alliance's powerhouses as a boss. Oh, the group of Alliance powerhouses sighed. It had nothing to do with them again. Duque did not care about what kind of deal they made in order to get into the battle. In any case, what Duque wanted was an absolute crushing and destruction. Basically, every time a powerhouse jumped out from the Horde's side, there would be a corresponding powerhouse on the Alliance's side who would rush up and drag them to the side to fight. As soon as Garush appeared, a countess on a platform on Naxxramas jumped off a building. Everyone in the Alliance knew what Countess Katrana was. Now the countess jumped off a building. Under the acceleration of gravity, the countess's falling speed increased. The strong wind blew her black hair wildly, and her red dress looked like a falling comet from a distance. The countess did not stretch her neck and let out a long roar. In the blink of an eye, the clothes on the countess' back turned into a pair of black wings. Her slender and fair limbs turned into dragon claws covered in fine and solid black scales. Her seductive body was rapidly expanding. It only took about 3 seconds for her to transform from a human to a dragon. When she landed on top of Garaka's head, Onyxia had completely transformed into her dragon aspect form. Garakas, who lacked the experience of fighting a dragon aspect, was caught off guard. Just as it raised its huge head, it realized that its wings had been hit by the opponent's signature, deep breath. After being reinforced and strengthened by the fire elemental realm, the progenitor dragon's entire wing was carbonized when it exploded into a sky full of sparks. The progenitor dragon let out a pained roar. Even after tumbling for more than 300 meters, it still could not stabilize its body. In the end, it was still a primitive creature, unlike the 5-colored dragon race. The chromatic dragons were strengthened by the titans, and the truly powerful wyverns could even control the elements to soar in the sky. No one would have thought that the wyvern boss of the Horde would be at an absolute disadvantage right from the start. As Garakas tumbled to the ground, Onyxia used her incomparably proficient flying skills to hover, and use her 4 sharp claws to remove parts from Garaka's body. When the progenitor dragon crashed to the ground, creating a huge crater on the red ground, Onyxia also added 2 more legs. She directly used her considerable weight and the kinetic energy brought by the acceleration of gravity to press down on the opponent's lower back in one breath. Crack! It was the crisp sound of vertebrae breaking. Without giving the opponent any room to fight back, the black dragon's mouth, which had countless sharp teeth, had already bitten Garaka's neck. At the same time, Overseer Zyra was split in half by the black dragon's claws. The people of the Alliance could barely see a black shadow flash down. When they could see it clearly, the scene that decided the outcome of the battle had already appeared on the screen. They only saw the black dragon princess, wearing a huge Alliance cloak, defeating the opponent as a mount of the Alliance. Regardless of whether it was the siege craftsman Haisu or the Karakasi heroes of the Mantis Demon, they were all hammered and killed one by one in front of this group of powerful people from the Alliance. This was not a battle of the same level. On the other side, Duque was still playing with brain-dead Roar. In the distance, more crown guards, who had escaped from the volcanic eruption, madly rushed over. But they were killed by the Alliance elites led by the Silver Hand. In the center of the battlefield, there were not many Horde warriors still fighting. After another fierce clash, Theon used Ashbringer to suppress Nazgûl. Looking at the Horde general who was already riddled with scars, he finally could not bear to see him die. He suddenly whispered, "Surrender. You are not one of those madmen who disregard everything and the lives of the people for the sake of power. You are different from them. If you surrender, I swear in the name of the Holy Light that the Alliance will give you fair treatment." Nazgûl, of course, knew that he could not defeat Theon, but his answer was incomparably loud and clear. "I am Nazgûl, the fist of the chieftain, the Horde's commander. If today is the day I die, then I will die gloriously on the battlefield, for the Horde. Is it worth it?" Theon was a little anxious. "Worth it? There is no such thing as not worth it. I am very happy that I am fighting a glorious battle with you. In the end, I stand on the side of the chieftain because this is my mission. If the person who defeats me in the end is you, I will also be very happy. Gurus will lead the orcs to destruction. Are you willing to do that? If the orcs are really going to go extinct, it is the will of the heavens. Otherwise, there will always be a hero who will lead the orcs and our world to prosperity." With that, another fierce clash ensued. This time, Tyrion had miscalculated. In his imagination, it would be another clash of swords and axes. But at the last moment, he did not know if Nazgûl's legs gave way, or if Theon still thought that Nazgûl was at his peak. Under the fierce attack of Ashbringer, it directly hit a large gap in Nazgûl's weapon. This directly broke his weapon. This, after Ashbringer, which was like a door plank, slashed out, it did not stop at will. Ashbringer, which represented the extreme path of toughness, faithfully carried out the power that its master had given it. With a flash of golden light, a huge wound appeared from the right side of Nazgûl's neck to the left side of his abdomen. There was no pain, no regret. On the rough green face that was unique to the orcs, Nazgûl smiled. Although I have lost, it is still honorable. Loktar Ogar." Theon suddenly felt a pain in his heart. He had defeated countless enemies, but he had never thought that he would feel like his heart was being cut by a knife after being defeated. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.